Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 27th of 2023 for the regular council meeting. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that we are all meeting on the traditional lands of Acadia First Nations, part of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Could we all rise and join me in singing in our national anthem, O Canada? O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all our sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. All right, tonight we have a big crowd, and thank you, each and every one of you, for coming. I got to lay a few ground rules as per our council procedural policy. We will not be entertaining any questions or comments from the gallery, so I would ask that you please refrain from asking any questions or blurting anything out. If you see me calling order, that's what I'm talking about. So could you please observe those rules? And to councilors, please remember that all questions and comments and staff is directed through me to the person that you're going to indicate. So it's just, we're going to be following Robert's rules tonight a little more closely than usual. There's no in-camera meetings or in-camera agenda items, so that means when the meeting is closed, if you wish to speak to me or any of my colleagues, we'll be free as soon as the meeting is done. So without further ado, thank you everyone too for singing O Canada. I think it's a much nicer venue if everyone sings rather than doing a recording. And also, whatever happens tonight, please remember that you will get your chance to speak in front of council, provided what happens tonight with our municipal planning strategies and land use bylaws. You will get that chance tonight. If we do decide to pass first reading, we will be picking a date and time and venue. So, moving on, item number 6, approval of the minutes. You all have that in your package. What is the pleasure of council? See what happens when I get off track? Item number 4, approval of the agenda. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda as circulated? Hearing none, a motion to approve the agenda as circulated is in order. Moved by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert, seconded by Councillor Daniel Allen. A motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 5, if there's any declarations of conflict of interest, please notify me and I'll make sure that our recording secretary has recorded. Moving on to item number 6, trying to move this meeting ahead too quickly. Approval of the minutes. You all have them in your package. What is council's pleasure with those minutes? Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham.
I'll move the adoption of the minutes from August 16th. It's a public hearing, August 16th, regular council, and August 29th, special council meeting.
Okay, motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushing. Motion on the floor to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 7, old business. Voting for the Mariner Center Board and nominating committee appointments. So Jenny, I'm going to ask that you send out the ballots for the director's seat. This is for one position. And there's two names on the ballot.
I'll bring her up.
Okay, you have all seven? Okay, so Madam CAO and Jenny will be counting the ballots.
So Mike Surratt and the municipal clerk will be, counting the
Oh, okay.
ballots. There'll just be a second, and they'll bring the results to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'll repeat that. I'm pleased to announce that Councilor Lauren Cushing has been elected to be the Director of the Mariner Center Management Authority Board. Congratulations, Councilor Cushing. Okay, the second one was for the nominating committee appointments. However, there's only two remaining. Counselor Cushion was nominated for both the nominating committee and the Mariner Center Board. Since Counselor Cushing cannot sit on both positions, that means there's only two of us. And those names would be myself and Counselor Hilton. Counselor Durkee. Sorry, my apologies. So myself and Counselor Durkee would be acclaimed into the nominating committee. Moving on, item 7.2, the food security project. You all have a briefing note in your package. What is the pleasure of council? Madam CEO, do you wish to speak on this first?
Maybe just briefly, Mr. Chair. So council has been taking a look at ways in which the community is addressing food security issues across the municipality and in Yarmouth County more broadly. And throughout the course of probably the last 9 months or so, council has participated in a number of ways with respect to food security. So originally this spring, council was taking a look at perhaps hosting a community meal and what would that look like and how would access be given to residents across the municipality. And then we went through the applications for your grants program this year and recognized that a lot of community groups are addressing food security in their own micro communities. And then you received an application from a new agency who's very focused on food security. And in addition to that, you set aside $1,500 in your budget for any kind of food security asks that might come your way. So then council said, well, I think we need, a good kind of bird's eye view about what's going on with food security. So attached to the briefing note is the research that was undertaken by staff outlining the extensive amount of work that's being done in the community to address food security. So the recommendation from staff, Mr. Chair, is that council's approach seems to be effective. It leverages financial and human resources to stretch them as far as we can across the community. So by that I mean we continue to invest in food security through the grant program. We reserve the $1,500 for asks that come your way during the year, and just kind of continue to lean in with community partners and do our part on food security.
So council, you have in front of you the recommendation. You can either accept, decline, or send it back to staff for further research. Councilor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we need to make a motion to continue this as I guess I will. I'll make a motion that the municipality of the District of Yarmouth continue our approach for addressing food security by setting aside $1,500 from our budget, which I'm assuming is our grants budget, for food security throughout the year.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham. Any discussion on that motion?
Yep.
Councilor Hurlbert, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to CIO Brooks and staff for going through this. I think, as a council, we know that there are lots of things that are happening, but this, for me, reading this 12-page document and showing the tremendous support that our community has from volunteer organizations, fire departments, all of those things. For me, it was, just solidifying that our community will continue to help the community, and if we can do that by helping those people help, those who are in need, I think that, for right now, that is our best approach, and I just want to applaud every single one of those people and more who are in this document who have stepped up to help the community. And I would, encourage our fellow councilors, and I know some of us do, all of us do, to step up and help some of those volunteer organizations as they continue to reach out to those people who have food security issues. Thanks.
Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, item 7.3, Acts of Kindness Grant Application.
So, Mr. Chair, this application has been pending while council undertook the review of the food security issues. The community group did present to council earlier this year and have indicated that they're fully funded for their activities this year, and so council just needs to finalize their decision on this application.
What is the pleasure of council? Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciated the acts of kindness presentation that they made. I believe they're doing good work. I've seen another 500 meals that they passed out over the previous weekend, and I would be fully on board for entertaining some sort of an ask if they hadn't kind of told us at that meeting that they were fully funded for this year. So I think if we just leave as is and ask them to reapply to the grant process in April, that would be acceptable.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The act of kindness application, I believe, they're in their worthy cause that they do every Saturday or Sunday at times to provide food for many people, not only within the town, but within the municipalities also. I think they're a very worthy group, and I believe we should definitely look at providing a grant for them for next year when our grant programs are accepted. Thank you.
Any more discussion on that topic? Hearing none? Item 7.4, Rural Internet Project Update. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's a no-action piece for tonight. Council had asked me to arrange for you to receive an update from Build Nova Scotia, who's undertaking the contracts for the rural internet project that we are partnered on. And due to scheduling conflicts, it's been next to impossible to get the Chief Executive Officer here in Yarmouth County to meet with you. So what he did was he filed a project update, which is attached to the briefing note, and it appears that the projects are going to be completed on time as contracted, so there's no action.
One thing I'd like to point out, Port Maitland has, I think it was 562 household units. Carlton Center, Pleasant Valley South has 119. Yarmouth, Arcadia, Chebogue, Sanford, Overton, South Ohio has 266. North Sheboygan has 8, and Greenville has 6, and these are all scheduled to be completed on December 2023. Councillor Hurlbert, I think. Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham, you have the floor first.
I've been called worse. Just for clarity's sake, it says Yarmouth, Arcadia, Chebogue, Sanford, Overton, South Ohio. There are several locations that don't have the service, Doctor's Drive being one of them, and there's others that may not have the service in District 5. Does that Yarmouth, is that sort of Dayton, Hebron, or what does that mean? Because there's 266. I know we haven't been approached, but any clarity around that, or can we reach out? Or yeah.
If an individual inside a dwelling at a civic address can demonstrate that they're not adequately served, and I don't know what the speeds are up and down, then they can apply to be included in a project. But only areas that did not have access to the speeds of internet were considered for these projects. So there are some areas that had access to Eastlink, for example, are not part of this project. They would still be on that infrastructure. So I would encourage any resident who has slow internet to do a speed test, and we can put on our social media again where you send that information to Build Nova Scotia just to get it on their radar, because it's possible with growth that there are new civic addresses that don't have adequate speed. So that would be my recommendation, Mr. Chair, through you to the Deputy Warden.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm still unclear. So can we reach out and find out if Doctor's Drive is one of those, is slated to have the service or not? I'm not certain.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is a map. We'll take a peek at the map and see what roads are in each map for each
Yeah,
area.
send that along, that'd be great.
For
Okay,
sure.
thanks.
And also, Madam CEO, you mentioned too that we'd publicly post on there on those who are not well-served, and I do believe the download speed was 50 and upload speed was 10, if I remember correctly. Councillor Patty Durkee, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I don't enjoy the traffic delays on Highway 1 and in my district, I am certainly enjoying the fact that I see the work being done and that high-speed internet will be coming to most, if not all, of the areas in our district, and appreciate all the work that has been done over the last few years, because we know it's been a while to make this happen, and we all look forward to having this completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the CAO, I have had numerous residents on the Brenton Road reach out on a regular basis, and I feel like even though it's not me not doing the work, I feel like I'm letting them down every time I say, it's going to be December, it's going to be December, and they keep saying, we see no traffic, we see no, like, there's nobody cutting trees or putting up lines. And so along with the download and upload speeds, could we also include the link to the map? Because that's what I have been telling people, and that's what I will individually respond to the people who have reached out to me. I just was waiting for this to come out, and then I was going to loop back to them to give them the map link, but if we could include that, so when you go on that link, you type in your civic address, and then that's when it tells you if you're in the zone or not. And so they had some concerns that they weren't even on the list. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to the CAO, I see there's 6 left in the Greenville area. Is there any word on the two, I don't want to use any names because, privacy thing, but there's definitely 2 homes farther up.
On the far side of the overpass.
That are by themselves, that have been having to use the satellite, which they're finding quite expensive. Is there any word on whether or not they will get touched?
As far as I know, the Starlink is the option that's being proposed for them right now.
Okay.
Yep.
So no
Madam
good.
CEO, did you not mention that that their civic address could be directed to develop?
So they have already been identified as underserved, but the fiber optic cable is not planned to go in their area. And so what Build Nova Scotia has offered, in cases where the economies of scale are not there for the cable to go by, that's where the Starlink subsidy has come in. So it's a one-time rebate on the purchase of the hardware to have satellite connection, and then, like every other internet subscriber, the homeowner's responsible for the monthly subscription fees.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lauren Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through to the CAO. I see Pembroke and the Chicago Point are not added and not considered on this at all. I think it's because of we all, especially down Chicago Point, the only way we ever did get internet was through some type of satellite, and so probably that's why we're not going to get fiber.
And I think part of that geography also already had Eastlink access, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Pembroke did, but not
Yeah.
Chicago Point.
Yeah.
So we'll be left out again.
Like I say, if residents do the speed test and they send the information to Build Nova Scotia, they have access to the Internet Trust Funds. They're in control of the money for the projects. They can make determinations on whether or not they have resources to bridge any gaps that get identified as they tie up the last bit of the work.
Thank you.
Any more questions on rural internet project update? Councillor Hurlbert.
My apologies. Through you to the CAO, could we add to maybe our December agenda to get an update to see if those numbers have changed, which we're hoping they should by then? And maybe, is it feasible to ask what the consequences are if they don't meet do we know what the consequences are if they don't meet that deadline?
I don't, know what the consequences are, and I'm not sure if the accountability is to the municipal partners, or if it's, the accountability is from the internet service provider back to Build Nova Scotia. I'm not sure who's accountable to who.
Complicated. Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, if we could have an update in December, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments on that subject? I'd open up my mouth, but I was going to bring another subject in, which is cell service, which we are not talking about today. Yeah, and we kind of are, but not in this line item. All right, item 7.5, Yarmouth Airport lobster exports. Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham, you have the floor.
Right, there was a news article, several, not so long ago, and that's why I had it put on the agenda, focusing on that for the airport. They've already done some work, but good news, there's been a task force which is being formed, and the terms of reference are attached to the agenda, and I'm sure they'll look into that possibility as well as others. And of course, we've mentioned several times that the good news story, I guess, from the airport over the last number of months has been the increase in the number of light flights that will be going out of there, and the new plane and all this type of things. That's a fantastic omen, I guess, for the airport. So I guess I'll restrict my comments to that, given that we've got lots of business tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. That task force just has been struck as about a month. We have a very energetic crew on that task force, and they're jumping in with both feet already to make some tangible requests and upgrades to the airport. All right, item number 8, new business. First reading of the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. For councilors' information, we have with us tonight Ian from Upland, Riley from C&D Design, and our newly appointed development officer, Derek Robertson. So, what is the pleasure of council? Councilor Nick Hilton, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ian's here. Is Ian going to review some of the issues, or do you want to go straight to motions, or would you? I think some of us have an interest in with the significant amount of information that we've received in the last couple weeks to wait for further review maybe of the agriculture piece before we actually provide first reading or a motion for first reading, but I'd like to hear what Ian has to say first.
You can go ahead, Ian, just turn on your microphone. I'll turn it on, don't turn it off, because I'm sure there's going to be more questions directed through me to you. So you have the floor, Ian.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to council. So, so tonight we're here to potentially give first reading to the draft municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. These are documents a long time in the making that would update the municipality's planning. As you'll recall, and for the benefit of those in the audience, this was before council back in August, and that council at the time wanted more information, and so directed us to hold a workshop to go through, all the details of the documents and how we got here today, because some councilors were on PAC, the Planning Advisory Committee, but not all of them, and weren't necessarily plugged in all along the way. So we did that, and that's part of the reason I'm not going to go through a thorough overview of all the content tonight. And that workshop was held on September 11th. It was publicly viewable. We had a lot of good discussion, I think, and good questions at that workshop. I understand that there are a couple of topics that, are still kind of floating around as perhaps requiring further discussion. So we have, we circulated to you a couple of options for moving forward, and potential motions to go with those, but of course those are just to support your work. You can certainly word them differently or make different motions. But the first option is to give first reading and schedule a public hearing to the documents as is. And that would move the August 16th draft forward for public comment, recognizing that any substantive changes after the public hearing would require first reading again and then another public hearing. So there is some value to, getting a document that you're comfortable with before going to a public hearing to, cover as many bases as possible. The second option is to amend the documents and however you'd like. And then it is possible to give them, as long as those amendments are precise enough in their wording tonight, you could certainly give first reading following those amendments and then schedule a public hearing for those amended documents. And I've taken a stab at, where our discussion went in the workshop, preparing some potential motions to cover some of the topics that, I heard discussion around or concerns around, and those were circulated to you. This can also be referred back to staff, kind of tabled for tonight and referred back to staff for, just more information on any particular topic that you want more information on, and you can tell us what that is. It is, will say, it is also the ability of council to refer this back to the Planning Advisory Committee for further debate or whatever that may involve. However, there is no guarantee, like, Planning Advisory Committee is an advisory committee that advises you, for example, some of the topics like sensitive environments, they may still come back the same, and ultimately council will have to be the one to, make changes at the end of the day. I've touched on a couple of topics that we heard from coming out of that meeting. I was guessing. I'm not going to tell you what you need to talk about as a council, but happy to take your direction for further discussion on any of those or on where we want to go coming out of tonight.
All right, I'm going to start. Obviously, council's uneasy. Some council members, I'm not exactly sure, because as all council members know, I have not been out canvassing and seeing what your concerns are and moving forward. I did hear some discussion when we had that update on September the 11th. And this is only a suggestion of mine. And one thing that I will point out, typically a motion should come to the floor and then we discuss it and put up a vote in yea or nay. But I think council, from my feeling, and especially from everyone's silence for the first start, not really knowing where to go, my suggestion, this is just mine, my preference, would be, number one, to defer the first reading. We've also heard a bunch of things, and that would be the first thing I would like to see do. Typically, a chair doesn't make motions, but if council doesn't do anything, I will make the motion to defer it to the next regular council meeting or another date and time. When we do that, we can make motions on everything that you've heard concerns about, whether it be with sensitive environments, whether it be with sensitive environments, just give me a second. Shipping containers, definition of livestock, all those other things that you've heard about, sensitive environment zones, entry into dwellings. I've heard a bunch of stuff like that. It's up to the pleasure of council which direction they wish to go, but myself personally, I'd rather not send it back to the PAC. This is in our hands. There's no guarantee that any recommendations we send back to PAC will get changed. They may send back the exact same document we have in front of us. PAC did a lot of work, a lot of consultation, which unfortunately didn't didn't have as big a uptake as we hoped. We will be talking that at the next committee of the whole meeting coming up in October, just to get that straightened out or see what we can do to try to help address that concern. But myself personally, that's where I would like to see the direction go. I'm only one of 7, so I'm going to open up to the floor to the first counselor that had their microphone on, Counselor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ian, for all of your work on this. It's, we had the opportunity to send in some of our concerns, and I see that, you know, you've come back with some options for us, which is just great. So that being said, though, there are still some unanswered questions, and so be it resolved that Council for the Municipality of the District of Yarmouth tables consideration of first reading for the draft municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, and request staff to provide information on specific topics that we bring forward.
Okay, Counselor, you made that motion. I'm clear on the motion, but is there a date on that?
Yes, to the next regularly scheduled meeting, council meeting.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Counselor Nick Hilton. All right, Counselor, are you prepared to repeat that motion again?
Yes, it was one that was recommended by Ian, number 3.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat it. Be it resolved that the Council for the Municipality of District of Yarmouth tables consideration of first reading of the draft municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw request from staff to provide information on topics at the next regular scheduled council meeting. Okay, I'm going to open up the floor to discussion, but I guess the topics would be anything that we make a motion, provided that this motion, anything that we talk about after this motion passes or fails would be afterwards, would be my understanding. Councillor Durkee, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yes, in terms of topics, I know one of them, the agricultural farming group, is yet to meet and come back to us on some issues that they have, which we appreciate. And we have some amendments to the draft planning strategy that I certainly will be making motions on, whether or not this goes ahead. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on that motion? Councillor Lauren Cushing, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I gotta say that I am pretty disappointed in how this all ended up. I do know our staff in Upland tried to promote to the public as much as they could to get input, and it wasn't really well received. Now that it's out and individual groups are able to review it, they are now finding some things that are not, they feel not in order. And I'll take part of the blame for this, where I second the first motion when it came talking about the sensitive environments areas. At that time, I did not believe that our marshlands, that our farmers have used for generations, grazing, haying, for generations have farmed them areas, and all of a sudden now they become a sensitive environment area. Very unacceptable. And I apologize that I never understood exactly where they were coming with this sensitive areas. In saying that, I never had a chance to voice my concerns at the next PAC meeting or the next council meeting following them, because I was out of commission from a major hard operation and recovery and on the up. So tonight, I certainly can voice my opinions. In my opinions, this document has to be thoroughly reviewed. We have had a few groups come forward now with articles that are not, how can the word I'm looking for? That are not satisfied, I guess, by these groups that will affect many members of the municipality of Yarmouth.
Counselor, could you please address me?
Pardon me?
Could you please address me, not the gallery?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, I will. I don't know if I was addressing them. I was just reading my notes and going back and forth. But anyway, if that's the case, I cannot support any type of motion. I'll get right to the point. I cannot support any type of motion, whereas we will think about changing some articles. There have been some articles. I believe this document has to be thoroughly looked at so that all aspects of this LUB and all people that may be affected by this new LUB or the revised ULB, how are they going to be affected? And we really got to find a way that we can reach out, to the public, all the public, to make sure that they are able to voice their opinions in a way that we all can value and understand. Providing their language in a more, lack of words, simple base will certainly help a lot of residents understand what is being talked about. So there's not any, so no one can interpret it one way and another person can interpret it another way. It's got to be point blank what it means and how it's going to affect residents from anywhere within the municipality.
Counselor, this is your 30-second warning.
Pardon me?
This is your 30-second warning. Your 5 minutes will be up in 30 seconds. Please
Okay, if that's the
continue.
case, Warden, I'll end it right now. Thank you very much for listening to me, for not allowing me to finish.
Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham.
Right. I would have probably potentially gone a different way, but I think the extra time is perhaps warranted. Given that, I think a little history is from the PAC is in order. Number one, and thank you, Mr. Watson, for all your efforts, your firm's efforts, and staff and the community for all our input. So it came to PAC. Mr. Watson brought a draft. There were two substantial changes made, and there was no consultation after that, certainly, about those substantial changes. The first change was to the aquaculture piece. So there was some language inserted that and PAC voted to insert that around not allowing any waste product, even a thimbleful, from an aquaculture operation. And that could include fish farm, it could include aquatic plants, it could include a fish hatchery. So that was the first change. The second change was the one that I think most people recognize as being a big change, is the massive increase in environmentally sensitive environment zones. And I don't know, it went from like a few hundred PIDs, 600 PIDs to like 2,100. So that was made at PAC. I voted against both those changes. And the reason being, here's the reason, is, to use a farming analogy, you reap what you sow. So what ends up happening, those are both similar in the sense that we've gone way beyond, and we've added additional legislation on top of provincial and federal regulation, which is not, in my mind, that wise. You can do it, but it does slow down business development. It slows down development. We've got a huge poverty issue in the area. Obviously, people are at the food bank all the time. We're hearing it in the news. And Nova Scotia's bad off, but we're a little worse than average. Not only that, we've got a huge issue with our demographics. Yes, our population's crept up a little tiny bit over the last number of years, but if you look at the data on page 4, table 1 of the NPS, working age has gone from 63.35 to 55.65. So what I'm saying is we've gotten out of our lane, first with the agriculture and now with the sensitive environment. So we've added a whole bunch of things that we can neither control for. We don't have the staff to look into it really. We're in the environment area, which is a provincial and federal. We've gone whole hog on that. And now all of a sudden, it was okay when it was agriculture because generally speaking, there were no agriculture businesses, so there was nobody sort of to champion that side of it, you know, the business development side. But now we've come and we've added a whole bunch of encumbrances on agriculture and whoever else. I mean, I don't know if you'll even be able to build a garage in lots of these places. So that's the similarity. I think the agriculture piece that ship sailed. You know, there's two sides to every story. We've got to worry about protecting the environment, but we've also got to worry about our tax rate, having people work and being able to feed themselves as well. So those are big issues for me. And what I'll say is we continually get every year after year, and somebody said one time, well, it's plenty industrial here. Well, we only have in the municipality of Yarmouth 5% of our tax base is commercial. The other 95% is residential. That's a big problem. Every time we go through a development agreement, we have long conversations about how, you know, we want to prove anything. So I think we've got big problems. And we've got a document that's been worked on a lot. I think the elephant in the room on the document, forget about the agriculture piece, I've had my say on that. You know, I think it's unwise, but we've done it. That ship sailed. But on this sensitive environment thing, I think the big piece that's generating 90%, rightfully so, of the concern about the NPS and LUB is the changes that were made at PAC to add all those additional areas of sensitive environment. So I think if we were to change that and move it to first reading, the other things are important but largely housekeeping.
Deputy Warden,
So-
30-second warning.
That's all I'll need, 30 seconds. So having said that, I think that if that clarifies it for people, we're out of our lane on the environment in many cases, and we're getting into provincial and federal jurisdiction. And again, if we keep on doing this, who are we going to stop from using their property next? That's what I'll say. Thank you.
Next one up, be Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I walked into this room tonight, I wasn't really sure where I was going, what I would support. I have some thoughts, and I've talked to a lot of residents, and I thank them for reaching out and being understanding that I have a 8 to 4 job, and sometimes the phone calls can't happen until after that, so I do thank them for that. My concern with sending it back to staff, I don't know where that gets us unless we have a specific list of things that that we've heard from our residents. So we have, I think, clarified a lot of things over the last 2 weeks. Ian had sent email, I sent him an email about the grazing of livestock and making hay on what would be proposed sensitive environment areas. He sent back a, detailed his opinion and maybe some words for clarity. It doesn't say you can't. It doesn't say you can't graze them, and it doesn't say you can't make hay. Correct, Ian? You're still on.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Yes, so municipal planning documents do not regulate resource-based extraction. So land-based resource uses, basically. So not fishing, not cropping or pasturing or haying, not logging, and not mining. Once buildings and stuff get involved, that's when a municipal land use document would come into effect.
Right.
But the actual resource activity, the land use bylaw does not regulate that. However, I can see how there was confusion, for example, where the sensitive environment zone says no main uses. It's just, we don't actually regulate those things.
Okay. And I apologize, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ian, that's what I should have said, sorry.
That's quite all right.
So back to you, Ian. So we're not trying to regulate the livestock grazing and the hay. We would be regulating structures that would be built on if this was passed, the sensitive environment areas. If the newly proposed area was here and you wanted to build a garage, you would need to go through a development permit, correct? Is that how?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, so that's correct. We're partially correct. We would not be regulating the haying or cropping, but if you did want to build a garage, the sensitive environment zone doesn't permit building structures, so you'd have to apply for a rezoning to a different zone, to an amendment, basically, to a different zone. So, yeah.
Okay, so I guess my concern, Mr. Chair, is that sending this back to staff will continue to delay our processes, good, bad, or indifferent, without a specific list, and I think we have compiled an extensive list over the last 2 weeks of things that I would like the public to know, and in my 5 minutes, I can't go through all of these to say, here's what we have validated or not validated with Upland, with Ian, with our consultant. I can't in 5 minutes go through all of those, and so by sending it to staff, how do we tell our residents who are concerned about these things what they are hearing or what they believe? Well, I guess they can believe what they want, but what they are hearing and the information we're giving them is accurate. So I struggle with sending it back without having documents given to our residents that show them what we know to be true or the things we can add to make it clearer. Do you want?
MCAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So even if the motion on the floor passes and the first reading is tabled, council can still make amendments to each
Today?
one of those items
Today?
tonight.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And that was my understanding from this motion on the floor, because then I would ask council, when we were done debating this motion that's currently on the floor, all right, so what would you like to see changed to make amendments on the existing thing, on the existing MPSLUB? Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we got a little off the question, in my opinion. The question is about postponing first reading. It's not about sensitive environment areas yet. It's not about
Not yet.
agriculture. It's not yet. And trust me, I have lots to say because I specifically disagree with some of the facts that have been stated here tonight, or not facts. So I'm in favor of tabling until the next general or the next regular council meeting. I'm also in favor of maybe meeting once online in between to review these changes and see if there's any other ones that we could bring to first reading. I am okay with getting to first reading at some point. But in the next month, it would allow 2 weeks for anyone else to send us any further information. Knowing that it's the final 2 weeks, we could meet with you in 2 weeks, go over these changes that may happen tonight, and any other concerns, you could bring that to the next meeting for first reading, and that's what I would like to see happen.
You done, Councillor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to point out, the reason for me wanting to table this is precisely that. I want to ensure that all the amendments that we feel need to be made are made first before we go to first reading. And that being said, it's to get the wording right, because we know there's been a lot of misinterpretation in some of the suggested bylaws, and so we want to make sure that they are read clearly, and we'll deal with some of those after this motion goes through, whether it passes or not, which I think is really important, because misinterpretation happens consistently, and we want to make sure that what we have decided to vote on will be clear. Thank you.
One thing I want to remind council that this is currently our document. We are the ones right now making suggestions. Then the suggestions, once we are okay with them, that's when we bring them back, if this motion passes, and review them, and then send them to the public. That's when the public would have their chance, not in between. It's our document, ours. We are the conduit to the public. And until, as Councillor Durkee said, until you see the wording in it, I have no idea what to tell them what would be in it when they have questions to me, because I don't know what motions are going to be made, and I don't know what the wording's going to look like afterwards. Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had received some clarity, which I wasn't 100% certain, and I thank our staff for setting me straight, that if this, at the end of all of this, we'll say it's all wrapped up and we know it's not 100% right, but it's righter than it is now, and I know that's not proper English, but we as council have, just so the public is aware, that we as a council have a right and an obligation to, if we feel, to bring motions to the floor to make amendments, because it is a live document. So even after it's all wrapped up and we still find a mistake on page 253, we can entertain the idea of making a motion and fixing some of that. So just that everyone knows that that is an option when we're all said and done.
You're absolutely right. This is a living document, and the last time that I can think of that we opened up the MPSLUB is in regards to allowing a pet cemetery in the airport noise reduction zone. You all remember that. That was this term. So just remember, this document can be opened at any time, whether it comes through the PAC, and not allowed use, or in a use that you don't think should be there, that would come through the PAC. So is there any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Councillor Allen.
Just wanting some clarity, I guess, Mr. Chair. So we are making this motion to table it to our next full council meeting. We're going to, I'm assuming that there's going to be some motions made when this is done, when this motion either passes or doesn't pass. Will those go to Ian and then just be presented back? Are we doing something in between? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how many times we're going to keep revisiting this. This has been going on for, it's been an ongoing process for 2 years at PAC. I want to get it as right as we possibly can. So I just want to I want to know what, for me, my scheduling makes it difficult over the next month to attend extra meetings. I hate to say that, but but I definitely want to be a part of this. Yeah, I want to be clear on what is about to happen. I want to make sure everyone else is clear on what is about to happen, because we get on some other subjects. So for me, I want to make sure if we defer this, there's going to be some motions. I know there's going to be motions. Is it just going to go into writing and then we will have it looked at our next meeting? And if it's good, then we pass it for first reading. If it's not, are we going to defer it again? Like, this is I want to know where we are and what this process is going to look like.
CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's a great question. So following this motion, if there are motions after the fact requiring amendments, they take effect immediately, and the planner will amend the document to honor those motions immediately. And so when it comes in October for first reading, it will be as amended tonight. So whatever motions are made by way of amendments tonight, that would be what would be in the document when it's viewed by council on October 25th. If council approves first reading on October 25th, the soonest possible day for the public hearing would be Tuesday, November 14th. That's because there's a requirement for 14 clear days of advertising of the public hearing. We've got a holiday in there. So the 14th of November would be the soonest possible day for the public hearing, and as the planner has advised council, only members of council who attend the public hearing can vote on second reading. So if public hearing is on the 14th, council can have a council meeting that night and entertain second reading, or the next day, or wait till council on the 29th of November. It's council's prerogative.
So in between this meeting and our next meeting, there isn't any more consultation. He's going to be sent away with what happens tonight, and then it's going to come back, correct?
Unless we're directed to consult, then we will consult.
Okay. Okay.
Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham, you have the floor first.
Yeah, I'll move that the municipality district of Yarmouth rescind the changes that were made at PAC vis-à-vis the expansion of the environmentally sensitive environment designated zones in the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw. So there would still be the initial set of environmental sensitive designated areas, but the additional ones that were added by PAC would come off. And that's the elephant in the room. That's what I think most people in the
Let
public.
me get
are
a
concerned with.
seconder, Deputy Warden. Keep your mic on because you still have the floor. Seconder to
yeah.
that motion? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushing. My apologies. Go ahead,
No,
Deputy
that's
Warden.
good. Procedure, that's right. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think that's the elephant in the room. Like, people want to be able to, and we haven't got, we're not in a situation here in the municipality of Yarmouth where we've got, huge areas of land being leveled like in Halifax or any other urban area. We can watch and monitor. If we need to make changes in the future, we can. But having said that, that's the big piece. People are concerned about if they're going to be able to use their land at all. So having said that, I've made the motion and would hope that everybody supports it because I think that's what the public wants. Thank you.
Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ian. The issue with farmland, grazing, haying of flood dikelands and floodplains, that had nothing to do with, or it was not the main reason for the main reason wasn't the increase in sensitive environment areas, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hilton, yes, that's correct. The issue of haying and grazing wouldn't be affected one way or another by the sensitive environments. It does affect buildings as discussed, but it certainly wasn't the drive behind that change from what I recall of the PAC discussions.
So, and that would be my understanding as well, is that there was an omission when we redid the documents that we kind of removed the sentence that allowed agriculture uses other than building of structures on these areas. But to say that the increase in sensitive environment areas is related to that is incorrect. We can still protect our sensitive environment areas and hay on flood dikelands and floodplains. It's been that way for years. That is not the issue. The issue is that we're using it as a scare tactic to remove the sensitive environment areas. Our MPS and LU, or MPS, the first half of it talks about environment. Ian would tell you, I believe if you asked him, that throughout consultation, the community, the consultation we did get was all about protecting the environment. And this is a step that allows that. And I know that it does affect the building of structures in certain areas. But when you read the letter from Anna Mallon that's attached to the agenda tonight, these are the areas, it's not an entire PID, it is sections of PIDs. And it's the sections that you wouldn't build a building in anyway. So yes, it may create some issues for someone if they were going to, if it was maybe incorrectly labeled as a bog or something, but there is avenues to get around that. So if you believe what's in your MPS, the last MPS and this one, that environment is important, this was the only area that protects inland bogs, wetlands, sensitive environment areas. We're reverting back to floodplains and coastal wetlands and dikelands, which are all on the coast. So anything within Modi that is inland will no longer be protected. And I want to be very clear that that's kind of a big deal. And I know it's a big deal the other way, but I would rather be overprotected when it comes to environment than under.
Okay, I'm going to continue going around after the last one is up. Before I call for a second one, I'd like to speak on this issue. All right, the next one would be Councillor Patty Durkee. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We all know that the environment is extremely important to us, and once we've destroyed it, we can't get it back. So the fact that we've enlarged our sensitive environment, these are the purpose of doing that is to protect our environments, not harm it any further. I think of some of the situations in our community that have already happened, and no disrespect to any businesses, but businesses have been built along lakes. And if you consider continuing to do that, one thing that happens if there's a leak of any kind from any chemicals, we're in trouble. Because that's what happens, the chemicals go from one lake to the next, and that's going to devalue property, et cetera. We've already suffered from that in the past. So the fact that we want to increase our sensitive environment is something that we're not doing it to prevent people from building, and we're not doing it to prevent people from having industries. We just want to make sure that those industries go in the right location so that our environments continue to be protected. As you all know, I'm hugely in favor of the riparian buffer zone. We've had so many people, unfortunately, have disregarded that bylaw, and we're seeing a huge increase in blue-green algae. Is it caused partly by the environment? Yes, but it's also caused by people putting fertilizer on their property. And to say that, well, people need to be able to do what they want, but I understand that, but if you're going to destroy our waterways, then that's something that we have to be careful with. We don't want that to happen. We have wonderful lakes, we have wonderful properties. As the deputy warden had mentioned earlier, most of our taxes come from residential properties, and if those are starting to devalue because we destroy our environment, then that's not going to be good for the municipality of Yarmouth. In terms of the size of the sensitive environment, my understanding from Ian, thank you very much again, Ian, is that the majority of the places, they really are sensitive environments, and that there is probably something we might be able to do to define it a little better. And if we can do that, I think it would be to our advantage. Thank you.
Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember very quickly into my term, in less than 3 years, we had a large group of people who were concerned about land in their neighborhood, and maybe not in their neighborhood, that I feel was the catalyst for even opening this discussion. So now we have a group of people, some may be the same people, I think, who are saying we don't want this sensitive environment. But I feel that we need to do our municipality justice and be clear that what we are doing is for the good, you know, as Councillor Durkee said, the good of the community. We don't want people building on swamps and marshlands. We just want, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but we need to be able to control that. And, you know, when I was talking earlier about the agricultural permitted uses, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ian, if I may, is it okay if I read some of what you had replied to me in that email, where it talks about no main use are permitted, but it doesn't say agriculture is permitted?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, please go ahead.
Okay. He said that we did that intentionally because land use bylaw does not regulate crop-based agriculture or animal pasturing. we did not want to give the impression that we do by including it, so they didn't include it. He says there could be a clarifying note added that I will probably make a motion to later, but I think that our constituents, our residents need to understand that we're not trying to limit what they're doing, we're trying to protect their land. I hear time and time again, people don't want this in their backyard, they don't want that in their backyard. They want to be able to swim in their lake, they want to be able to feel like they are protected. The beginning of that, as Councillor Hilton pointed out, the beginning of all of this discussion was about sensitive environment and how people value what we have and where we live. And I am not willing to keep it as narrow as it was, because we heard loud and clear less than 3 years ago from a group of people who were concerned about the environment. And I think that, if we're talking about agriculture, I would say that some of those people who are involved in agriculture clearly care about their land. They do, or they wouldn't be asking us the questions they're asking us. So for me, I will be voting against reverting back to the way it was. I think we need to leave it as it is written in our newly proposed, and work to Councillor Durkee's point, work to clarify and try to alleviate some of those fears and misinformation that is out there. I keep going back to that. I feel like our public hears what they want to hear, and we need to be clear that they can pasture their land, they can hay their land, they just can't build a barn until they have permission, because most people wouldn't want the barn on the bog anyway. We're not talking a whole PID, we're talking tiny bits of that. So for the reasons that I feel we have residents in our community who care about the land and they want to protect the land, and for that reason I feel like I can't keep it as it is, and I think it needs to move forward to the proposed language.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear a lot of great comments from our councillors. Unfortunately, I believe that it should be reverted back. I think there was a staff recommendation at PAC originally. I think that moving forward and extending to an extra 1,400 pieces of PID, where we are now, I guess, taking control of little pieces of people's properties that they pay taxes on, without more consultation to that large of a group, I just think is wrong. I don't believe that I can't sit here and myself, I just can't sit here and tell everybody 2,100 PIDs what they can or cannot do. I think we're in a time when people know that environment is important. I agree that there's places where people won't build because they know that it's, it's not good to be there. I just don't think they need us sitting behind them telling them that. I think common sense should prevail, and that I will be voting in favor of reverting back. I know that the province has a Coastal Protection Act coming in that's going to cover some of the coastline as well, hopefully, if they can ever get it in. And to Councillor Durkee's point, maybe as we move forward, we do a little bit more consultation, then we increase. Maybe a bit at a time. I'm not sure how that would work or how that would look, but right now, today, I cannot move forward without, I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lundquist, then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Interesting. From some of the conversations been, that marshlands for haying and livestock use was not intended to be in the ARUB, because it's always been done that way. And if that was the case, if that was understood, by farmers, we would not have had the phone calls, or the letters, or the concerns, or the people here tonight. So marshlands was a big issue in that sensitive area thing. And I'm sorry if some people don't agree with me, but that marshland is very important, and it's a topic that should be discussed more. And also that there could be a number of other items in the LUB that people are not aware of yet that may be against it. So anyway, we definitely have to have this looked into. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Myself next, then I'll open up the floor for the second round. This is a quick question, Ian, to you. Back in May, the Planning Advisory Committee initiated a separate report to review approaches on this specific topic. Is that work currently being done?
Well, to you, Mr. Chair, I suppose. Not by us. My understanding is that kind of the discussion, not by myself personally, that kind of the discussion of that got tabled through the discussion of sensitive environments in our work.
Okay. Because the reason why that was brought up is it was there to review the potential approaches to requests from TREPA, if I'm not mistaken, to review the issue that there was going on at Big Pond and to look at a wider approach for protecting wetlands and stuff. And that's the reason why I asked that. So we already had this sensitive environment zone that was in the documents before that. But what really bothers me, and I'm not here to point the finger on how it was done or why it was done or anything like that. What bothers me the most, and I'm going to refer to what Councillor Allen said, is a motion was made in June to expand it, and in July, you gave the Planning Advisory Committee your recommendation, which was to, with that many landowners being involved, that it should go to a public hearing. The PAC rejected that and sent it directly here. So here we sit. I think it was a misstep by the PAC, and don't get me wrong, I was the chair of the PAC back for years, probably 10 years before I took up being the warden. I stepped down from the PAC. I do remember way back then, 10 years ago, when we were going through the MPS and LUB, there were still some issues with the document then, and we had a lot of public concern then, and some of the issues were fixed. But what bothers me the most, there was a motion made in June to expand it with no public consultation. In July, here it is. It's sat before us. I can't agree with that. I can't. Now, one of the reasons why I can't agree with that is the public was not consulted. They weren't. I honestly have no idea if the public, as a general rule, if this was put out in front of them in a public hearing, if they would say yes, that they like the expanded zone. If they did, absolutely, I'd vote for it. I'd be all over it. But my problem is I have really nothing to go on. There's a few concerned citizens on both sides of this, and I really don't know where to go. And that's the reason why I asked back when they were talked about the Planning Advisory Committee in May had already initiated a separate project to review potential approaches. That's where I have the problem. That work has not been completed, but yet we jump into something made in June and July, here we are. So as the motion as it sits on the floor, I support, only because if that work is still going on, we will see potential approaches to expand with public input through the Planning Advisory Committee on how to expand projects like what went on at Big Pond. As you all know, I'm a big proponent of the environment. There's been a lot of things that have been acted on my previous terms. Are they right or wrong? Some things are a little restrictive, absolutely. But I think this is a step too far at this time. Deputy Warden.
I'm not going to sit on the fence on this issue. I'd encourage people to vote affirmatively for or in favor of the motion. And one of the additional reasons is, and again, I'm pro-environment too, for sure, but this is not but by putting this in, that's extra. Don't worry, there's plenty of provincial and federal regulation to protect the environment. We can't get anything built. I know people have trouble building things. This is going to add to that trouble. And it's going to come back to us through a development agreement. I don't want to be sitting here deciding whether or not somebody can build a garage or not. That's not not what I'm on council for. So I think that's a step too far. The other piece is, who's going to do all of the staff work around all these development agreements? We're probably going to have to hire more staff if we do this, because it's that added piece of bureaucracy. It's got to come to us if we're going to approve this and that for building. So it's a lot of bureaucracy. It's another level of complexity. I've preached it over and over again. We have provincial and federal regulation and we should, if we think that there's a necessity for additional environmental protections, we should be lobbying and advocating for that with our federal and provincial counterparts, same as the public should. We shouldn't be putting it in because it's hurting business, it's hurting developments, and hurting our ratepayers, and it's hurting landowners. And so, for those reasons, I think this is a clear way forward. We're out of our lane with this. We're going too far, and we've got some additional pieces. I can live with that. That was consulted. Ian's firm did the consultation, and we did that first part. But again, the second part was not held to the same amount of rigor in terms of consultation. So I think the motion makes a lot of sense, and obviously I made it. I'm going to be voting for my motion. Thanks.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Derek, our development officer. If I may, Derek, was C&D Designs, was that a project of C&D Designs where it was started looking at refining the sensitive areas? Oh, thank you.
Caroline mentioned to me earlier that she did start a report on that, but it's incomplete at the moment because of this, actually.
Okay, do we know, through you to our CAO, do we know why that report was not completed? Why that was stopped?
Because the assignment was to research possible approaches to the request with respect to Big Pond, and this change to the sensitive environment zones would supersede that application. So the work was put on hold until council dealt with this issue.
Was it so, through you, Mr. Chair, so was this just specifically Big Pond, or was this, so how did we get to this point where we increase the size of the sensitive areas?
So it was brought from the floor at the PAC, and I think you were actually absent maybe the first night it got discussed, Councillor Durkee, through you, through the chair to you. So it came from the floor. There were some questions that were put to the consulting planner at the time, and then the PAC moved forward with expanding the volume of land that's included in the sensitive environment zones.
Okay, so if this motion passes tonight, to revert back, can we move forward with refining our sensitive areas in the future?
Absolutely. So if the motion on the floor passes and there's an appetite on the part of council to understand more clearly, they can ask the PAC to undertake work and bring back recommendations.
Thank you.
Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and, lots of conversation, lots of opinions, and, to each their own, but to say, we're not willing to make a change because it affects multiple PID numbers. Every decision we make here tonight affects multiple PID numbers. So saying that this one is different, it's not. And any decision we make is going to affect multiple PID numbers. I think, we talk about being in our lane and staying in our lane. I think that's great, except if you're trying to look out for yourselves and your community. because the only reason that we don't have a salmon farm in Chabot is the MPS and LUB. It was the words in that document that stopped approval before it got to the province, when we know the province would have green-lighted that. So if you are concerned about environment, if you think environment's important, then you need to be out in front of it, and you can protect parts of your community through this document. If you think it's more than we need, you know, that may be true, but it's better to have more than not enough. The Coastal Wetland Act will only protect the things that were in the last MPS. We still have nothing protecting inland wetlands, bogs, and sensitive areas. We know that it doesn't affect agriculture. We know that it probably does affect building in some ways that you need specific approval. I'm not sure what the workload looks like, and I don't know why that, you know, my conversation with our C&D was that there was going to be, you know, that recommendation was going to come back to council on how we could refine those areas. And I'm not sure why it didn't, but it didn't. So I'm not willing to remove what I know is right on the idea that that we might do something in the future. This is how environment becomes hazardous, how it becomes screwed up. If we don't protect it early, we won't have it later. It's easy to be, it's hard to be proactive. It's easy to do what we think is right after the fact, or after something's happened, or after we have a salmon farm. So, and when I say salmon farm, I mean one that releases 460 Olympic-sized swimming pools of effluent back into the ocean, not a salmon farm that is a contained, fully contained recirculating system, which this new document allows. We are just looking out to make sure that the best industry, the best quality industry, best practice is happening in our municipality. And you do that by making hard decisions like this. So I'll be voting to keep it in. And yes, it means that I'm probably taking your swamp away from you, but so be it. Thanks.
Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? I did see her out of the corner of my eye, but.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Hilton's point, you know, some of the decisions we make aren't popular, and from the very beginning, I felt I was a councillor that maybe put things forward that wasn't popular, and I guess I'm going to continue down that road to say things that maybe aren't popular. But for the good, I feel, for the good of our community, I could say, yes, we'll vote to take this out and revert back to the way it was, and hopefully down the road, something comes back to us that may or may not be to our liking. In the meantime, in our backyards, you know, a company tries to, you know, erect something on a piece of swamp, and then what happens? Because I know what happens now. The same residents who don't want other things in their backyard aren't going to want the environment in their backyard destroyed either. So I get that there are people who will be unhappy that we are trying to protect our environment, but I firmly believe that there are an equal amount of people who would be calling me, telling me they aren't happy that something is being developed in that sensitive environment. We've lived through that. I'm going to be unpopular with, you know, I know I'm going to be unpopular with this, but I will be voting against it.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everyone around this table has a vote, and I respect that, and we're all allowed to vote the way we want. I just want to make it clear that when we say reverting back to the way it was, we're not going back to doing nothing. We are creating a sensitive environment zone, correct?
Yes.
So it's not like we're taking it completely away. We are just taking the farther inland, for now, perhaps, not saying forever. I just, you know, I would like to see some more work done as far as the consulting issues and things like that before I'm ready to go that far. That's all. It's not that I'm not against the environment, but I want to make it clear that we are not reverting back to nothing. We are reverting back to a sensitive environment zone. It's just not going to be as, I shouldn't say it's not, it may not be as big as what was presented to us through PAC. That is all that I'm looking at right now. So that's where I'm standing. And I appreciate everyone's comments and everyone's vote. I respect the way it goes. As part of council, I will support council whichever way anything goes. But I just believe that everyone has a right to have a say at some point, and this probably overstepped it for me a little bit.
Councillor Cushion, then me.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We're talking about sensitive areas. Number one, do we have a proper definition of them? And why are they a sensitive environment area? So I think if we knew that these different areas are, the reason why they're sensitive because of migration of birds or special species of plants, and is it a chance for fish to migrate up through the lakes and whatnot into the sensitive areas and whatnot. So are we going to be able to get some type of definition of what they all are, or what they include? Gee, that was a good answer.
Is that a question for the planner?
Was that a question for the planner?
I guess so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Cushing. So the sensitive environment zone, as it is currently drafted, covers, uses the Nova Scotia Department of Forests inventory mapping. So they've done aerial interpretation to identify different land covers. And that extent as it currently is drafted includes coastal salt marshes, beaches, coastal rocks and dunes, and then it includes wetlands, wetlands in lakes, open bogs, and treed bogs. So wetlands and bogs primarily are the big change since PAC had the first draft, and those would be lands that are typically considered sensitive to disturbance.
All right, one last thing. You had mentioned, Ian, aerial interpretation. I looked at those maps, and there's a lot of areas that I know, roaming the backwoods all through Kemp and Carlton and Brazil Lake areas. They're not included. I can give you a fine example on my own property, which I own 200 acres on. There's an area, it's called Aunt Sally's Pickle Pond. It's a 4-acre pond with about a 10-acre bog all around it. That isn't included. It isn't. The maps are very up for debate, and for someone to contest in there, they'd have to get I forget the terminology, but a hydrologist or
Wetland delineator.
Wetland delineator, and the owner of the property would have to pay for that wetland delineator to say that, no, this is not a bog. It might be in the thing, but no, it's not. I keep coming back to, we are working, sometimes you got to take small steps. And what I've seen, what happened here is we got a few inches. But what happened is we're taking feet. That's my biggest problem. And as I said before, maybe the feet is the way we should go, but my problem is that's got to go to public input. And it wasn't done. And if this motion does pass, from my understanding from the CAO, is the work will start again on initiating a separate project to review the potential approaches to the specific request. So that's why I'm okay with this motion that certainly sits on the floor. So is there any more comments? Question being called on the motion. Please signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye? Opposed? A vote of 4 to 3, motion is carried. Do you wish to have your names recorded? All right, is there any other, Councillor Durkee?
Thank you. The decision has been made, and we'll move on from there. So I would like to make a motion that the municipality of the District of Yarmouth direct staff to amend the draft land use bylaw as it relates to the teaching of one student at a time by delineating Clause 1 of subsection 5.2.1 and renumbering subsequent clauses.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. You still have the floor, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to comment, particularly as an educator, which I am, that I feel that this was put in to say that you don't need a development permit to teach people, but it was misinterpreted to the fact, the opposite side, to say, well, we're going to need permits for whatever functions that we want to carry out in our homes, whether it be rug hooking classes or art classes, and that actually was not the case. So no, we do not need a development permit if we want to have meetings and educational opportunities in our home. So under that circumstances, I made the motion because I think that we just need to take this out completely, and it should not be something identified at all in our municipal planning strategy, and so that we can ensure that our residents are free to carry on educational components and things in their classes as they so choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ian, when it says the teaching of one student, is there anything in all of these pages that would prohibit 4-H groups and those types of things from continuing the work that we know they do on private property, on maybe industrial land, on, farmland, I'm unsure.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hurlbert. So anything like 4-H or Boy Scouts of Canada or whatever those, community groups meeting at a farm or at a community hall or whatever, typically we would consider those to be accessory to the use. That, there's something that occurs, a community hall holds community events.
Right.
And that wouldn't require a permit, certainly not. Where things might, where you might start to move into that realm is if I've decided I was really good at yoga and wanted to open a commercial yoga studio in my outbuilding on my property where I was going to be regularly commercially teaching people on yoga, then you may be crossing that line into the, a separate land use, a separate commercial operation that would then require a permit there's pathways for that through, for example, home-based business. But yeah, there is a scale and an intensity and a nature that starts to get into that territory. But anything like 4-H or Scouts or homeschooling or anything like that, that's...
Thank you. So even if they were not on a fire hall property or a church property, if they were on a private residence property doing cow showing or horses, that would still be permitted. They don't require anything special. They don't need to come to us for anything. If it's just, I don't know the answer to that. And before I say, I guess I just need clarity, because this talks about one student, and if we're deleting that, I totally agree we need to be, but can this apply to more than just that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So, with anything, there's if I'm getting some friends over to show our horses, it's not an issue. If I'm running a horse showing
Commercial,
business,
yes.
then it is.
Okay.
And that's not to say that someone couldn't complain about it and have Derek look into it. And that was really the intention of this clause, was to have Derek be able to say, no, we're clearly saying, just do it.
Okay.
But I can understand the confusion.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. In the end, this is another point that I brought up about different sections of this revised LUB, that you know, that wasn't interpreted as it should have been, because we got phone calls and emails and whatnot concerning these subjects that which Councillor Hurlbert and Councillor Durkee brought up. So how many more is there out there that people are not really understanding or misinterpreting? So it's, you know, it's important that everything is looked at. Thank you.
Is that a question?
There's no question.
No, okay. So is there any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Any other motions to be made? Councillor Hilton.
Be it resolved that the council of the municipality of District of Yarmouth direct staff to amend the draft land use bylaw as it relates to shipping containers in the airport noise restriction zone by deleting subclause B of subsection 6.253 and inserting airport noise restriction zones as subclass C of the subsection 6.253.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Okay, it's fine. Councillor Hilton, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the reason I make that motion is because the airport stretch is a highly commercialized zone, no different than it is on the town side, no different than it is to the Hard Scratch Road. It's not a residential area. You have a number of businesses there already with multiple shipping containers. I was at a lot in town, to be honest, CNC Flooring, Terry's Rentals. They all use them as a cost-effective solution for storing materials. And I think the airport noise restriction zone, although residential on some sides of the airport, the majority of it is an area where you'd see increased business. So I think it's appropriate to not limit it to one 40-foot container because the majority of businesses there already have more.
Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for some clarity, and I'm assuming this maybe goes back to you, Ian. If this passes, that would mean that shipping containers would be allowed. So how about I ask you this? What are the restrictions in the newly proposed versus what it would be if it was in the airport noise restriction zone?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hurlbert. So currently in the draft as you have in front of you, shipping containers shall not be used for accessory buildings except for the following: temporary storage not exceeding 60 days in a calendar year, then up to 40 feet of container, however, because containers come in different lengths, however you want to slice and dice that, up to 40 feet in the hamlets, rural zones, and airport noise restriction zones, and then no restrictions in the industrial zones, basically. The motion made by Councillor Hilton would move airport noise restricted from the 40-foot cap to the category that has no cap.
And that would be for any part of the airport noise restriction zone, which would include the residential areas, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's what I was afraid you were going to tell me. Because fundamentally, I don't have an issue with them being in that area that we know of as the left-hand side of the airport runway. But I guess for me, I would have some concerns that then anyone within that area of the noise restriction zone could have an unlimited amount of shipping containers in I guess it's not a residential, is it, so they're not, so the airport noise restriction zone includes residential properties or not? Question mark?
Actually, I can answer that question. Yes, it does, because the airport noise reduction zone also includes where the animal hospital is in Arcadia, the Poor Farm, the residents just before and after the Rails to Trails park. On the other side, there's a housing complex that's almost in direct flight path of the, on the Lewis Road, I believe it is. There's
The
residences in
seniors
there.
complex?
I can't remember if it's a seniors complex, but it's a complex where there's rentals going on. It's the old church on the Lewis Road.
Oh, no. Okay, so I guess now I seconded the discussion to open, or I seconded the motion to open the discussion, because I do have I feel conflicted that I think on this side of the runway, it should be okay, but the rest of the area, it shouldn't be okay, and is there a way to resolve that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we could, this gets a little messy, but we could be specific, either PIDs or sides of the road, or if we wanted to be, we certainly could.
I don't know. I guess as the motion stands, and if it includes all of that residential area, I would have to say no. But if we could somehow massage this, and maybe this is for when we bring it back to staff, to massage that so it's only this area and not all of the residential area. So I am looking for direction? Or do we just vote and then decide after? What's the
You're going to have to vote because it's not, a motion isn't for direction, it's to actually add that in the zone.
Okay,
I have a few comments when you're done.
I'm done.
But I'm going to open up the floor to the other two microphones that were flashing first. Councillor Nick Hilton, then Deputy Warden, then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the airport noise restriction zone is very unique because I don't believe, through you to Ann quickly, you can't rezone it, correct? It is the airport noise restriction zone.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. You cannot, unless they updated the noise contours for the airport. It's a
Correct.
federal thing.
So the businesses that are in these areas are confined by specific rules, like very concrete rules. And we just got done talking about the sensitive environment area where we didn't want to restrict businesses from doing things. And now we're like, okay, you can have one shipping container. So at first, the discussion started at PAC because they were on-site. And now I realize that shipping containers are an affordable use for our residents. They're $5,000 for 40 feet of a secondary building, and now we're telling them they can have it, but only for 60 days. So I'd remove the whole darn section, to be honest. But I specifically think that this area needs to be open to shipping containers. It's around the airport. If you're going to see businesses to support commercial use of the airport, there's a decent chance they're going to have a shipping container, and probably more than one. So I either live in it or live next to it, and I don't foresee my neighbors filling their yards with shipping containers. I see the businesses on the airport stretch doing that.
Your microphone was on, I know it was, but Councillor Allen, then Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I liked where Sherry was going, but after hearing from Ian that you can't rezone, to Nick's point about how he may live in it and he doesn't foresee his neighbors adding, I like that, but you can't guarantee they don't. And we can't guarantee after this. I mean, I agree that's kind of a industrial zone going up the airport stretch from, we'll say, the Small Gaines Road, from the Small Gaines Road right up to the town limits is pretty much, it's looking more like an industrial type of area. Unfortunately, the airport noise reduction zone spans farther than just that. So, if there was a way to Councillor Herbert's point to make sure that the containers and stuff were just along that area, I would be in favor of this, but there's no way to do that. And, you know, once this is in, if this motion passes, then any person can have an unlimited amount of containers on their land. So in any part of this zone. And I don't believe that that's, for me, it's not a great idea.
Deputy Warden, then myself.
Yeah, I wouldn't be supporting the motion. It's not really zone industrial. I don't think it's the airport. It's the restricted zone, noise restricted zone. The reason I'm not supportive, generally I'm supportive of being able to use, you know, your land and have what you want on it, but obviously there's a lot of high value assets. People invested a lot of money on the airport stretch. There are a lot of car dealerships. There's a hotel there, so there are tourists in that area, and it's commercial, and therefore I think probably it's, you know, my view at this point, and I could be, you know, later on if somebody came and said, you know, we need this, we need it, you know, I could, at this point I wouldn't be supportive of it, but I mean, if it was done through a development agreement or something like that, then maybe, but I can't support the motion for those reasons. Thanks.
I simply can't support the motion that's currently on the floor for the simple fact that, number one, here we are debating in numbers and all that other stuff. This is work that should be done in the Planning Advisory Committee and not by a regular council meeting. Period. Hate to say it, it's the way I feel. There's a few things that's happened that I don't like that's happened, is there seems to be things thrown in the last minute, and then here we are in a regular council meeting, and I've always heard complaints that our meetings take too long. In about 10 minutes, I got to ask for an extension for a meeting, because we're doing the work of what the Planning Advisory Committee should have been doing. And I'm not very happy about it. That's where I'm going to leave it right at that. Councillor Hurlbert.
Question, if this motion fails, does that mean this cannot go back to staff for any future, what we're going to be talking about in the next month, this part can't be up for discussion? Madam
If it fails,
CA?
it can't come back up for discussion.
No, what I'm saying is it can't come back to council, but can it go back to the work that staff will do to better this MPS and LUB?
Please, staff, correct me if I'm wrong. If this was to come back, this would be a request by a landowner in the PID in the airport reduction zone, just like we had with allowing the pet cemeteries. In my opinion, that's where it should come from. It should come from a request from a landowner with a PID number is where it should come from.
But
And maybe council could, if I'm not mistaken, they could have development agreements that they have X amount, because this here says it's limited. Maybe a few would be okay. I'm not sure, but it also would also go to a public hearing.
So I guess for clarity, my concern is if this fails, is this done and we can't send it back to staff to tweak or figure out how we can add this?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Hurlbert, and I'll rely on Ian and Derek to jump in and help fill out this conversation. So, just a little context around airport noise restriction zone. It's not a zone you hear a lot about in municipal planning documents, and it's because it really only affects communities that are home to an airport. And airports have federal requirements placed on them. And so the zones in our community that are impacted by the existence of the airport are those zones because those are federal regulations. So it's important that everybody understands that. It's not as though technical experts looked at land around the airport and said, well, this is a reasonable number of PIDs or area around the airport to zone this way. These designations were handed to us by federal regulations. So it's really important to understand that context. I think what could happen, and this is where I'll rely on Derek and Ian, is staff could go back and take a look to see if there was any opportunity within the federal regulations to add another layer of zoning respecting commercial development only within the airport noise reduction zone that would allow council to take a broader view to enabling commercial development in that area. I'm not saying that could be, but that could be a piece of research that could be done to see if that's possible, which I think would answer the question around handling PID-oriented, commercially oriented PIDs in the noise reduction zone in a different way than residentially oriented PIDs in the noise reduction zone.
I think I got that clear. So if this motion doesn't pass, we can still make we could make a motion, or we could make a motion to ask staff to do that work.
To do that
Correct.
research, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Question being called. All signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. All in favor signify by saying aye. Nay? Nay. A vote of 5-2. Or, sorry, the motion has been rejected. A vote of 2-5. Would you like your names recorded, all those that voted no? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the wording is not going to be great on this, and we're going to go right back to what we just had the discussion about. Make a motion that we direct staff to do the work around the industrial PIDs within the airport noise reduction zone with regard to shipping containers? Or should I not restrict it to shipping containers?
Well, yeah, so I think if I understood the conversation around council, there seems to be a bit of an appetite to see if there's a way to provide some layered
Yes.
zoning that speaks to the unique demands of the commercial community versus the residential community.
Right.
So we would research options around that.
Jenny, do you have that?
I'm going to ask you to have
Can
it
you
repeated.
read that back? Sure, yeah, let her massage it, sorry.
So the motion is moved by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert to direct staff. Go ahead. Someone's going to have to turn off their mic. I can't. Okay, there you go.
The motion, as I believe I heard correctly, was to direct staff to review the work on the airport restriction zone to see if there are ways to use layered zoning that speaks to the commercial zones.
Commercial needs,
Commercial needs, yes.
And it's the airport.
noise reduction.
Noise
yeah.
reduction.
It's already seconded by Councillor Allen. I'll speak first. I think this should be done in Planning Advisory Committee, because here we are directing staff to do Planning Advisory Committee work. I would prefer to see this amended, that it gets directed to Planning Advisory Committee, where they can direct their staff, because right now I'm unsure where it goes, but committee work should be done in committees. This is committee work. It's just my opinion. Councillor Hurlbert?
My first comment wasn't going to be this, but here we go. I disagree. I think that, PAC has done their work, and we have all kinds of things that we have talked about, that we have heard from our residents on, that we are planning to change, and I think that it's well within our right as council to move ahead with these, with asking staff to come up with some things that are better. I think it goes back to planning, municipal strategy, and land use bylaw, and request staff to provide additional information on the topic. That's what we passed earlier, did we not? We did, right. Okay, so we'll go back to this work. I think it's important, to understand the airport noise restriction zone, and I didn't understand about the federal regulations, but I think that, we would be doing a disservice to our commercial district. Maybe do we call it in commercial? Is it commercial, the commercial area? Commercial businesses along that stretch of road. I think we would be doing them a disservice to not look into how we may be able to allow them to do some of the things that we currently are saying they can't do. So, yeah.
Before I continue on, we've reached our 2 hours as per our council procedural policy, and I don't know how...
You have a main motion on the
Yeah, I have a main motion on the floor. I cannot, until this motion is completed with. Deputy Warden?
Right, I think I'd encourage some caution around, talking about the work the PAC's done negatively to this point. Really, and I chair the committee, and, it's produced with the help of professional staff and our consultants and so forth, a couple documents, on the order of a couple hundred pages. And one would expect full well that as the document moves through the processes, that people would, from the public rightfully so, would read them and have some, bring up some points, definitely, and we're working toward making it even a better document now that it's at council. And, I chair the meeting, but obviously I voted differently than the majority on a couple issues. But having said that, I think the PAC did a fantastic job over a very, very long period of time. And so, I'd not want to see our council talking about how much they did wrong. I think it's more appropriate to say how much they did right, because the documents are generally very well formed, and I think will be useful moving forward. We had a big issue tonight that we talked about, and we changed direction, but that's fine. That's the process we've got in place. So those would be my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment that at this point, with our land use planning and municipal planning strategy, that is now in the hands of council, and I think it's up to us to make those decisions. I don't really want to go back to another layer of sending it back and having them to have to work on it and then coming back. I think we're quite capable of trying to make the best decisions we can at the council level.
I'll say one more comment. I never heard of this issue about shipping containers until September the 11th, when we had the debrief. So that tells me that there's one person that has a concern about this, and whether that's 1 or 100. I think this easily could be dealt with through the planning advisory. If someone has a PID number and they have a business there and they want to change something to allow something, they should go through that process. So therefore, I am voting against the motion that's currently on the floor. All right, any more discussion? Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The process of amending the MPS and LUB is, we're allowed, that's the whole point, is to make changes. It's not about having people apply for PID or per PID number. It's to address an issue that has come up specific to this MPS and LUB review. So shipping containers was something that was brought forth by a community member. So the PAC addressed it. I'm not sure if we addressed it appropriately. Like I said, it's still very limited for individuals on what they can do with a shipping container. If you're for or against them, I'm not sure why we say we wouldn't allow one in the airport noise restriction zone when the commercial district on the other corner has the commercial district, and we're only allowing for commercial use, which has them on the Hard Scratch Road, which also has residential. Like, it's the same thing. The only reason we're calling the airport noise restriction zone something different is because we federally have to. It's really very similar type of business in type of area. So, it was brought forward to PAC to be addressed. We addressed it. There's still questions around the regulations. So I'll be voting in favor of the motion that Councilor Hurlbut put on the table, because I think it's appropriate, and we'll do a little bit more work. I will say that I stick by my statement an hour and a half ago that we should have made a separate meeting to address these, the PAC and LUB issues so that we could go through our regular council meeting and do this via Zoom with Ian at a future time.
No, I'm not going to comment to that. I'm going to get myself in trouble. All right, there's a motion on the floor. Any more discussion? Question being called. All signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Nay. I'd like my name recorded. Motion carried. Any more? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that be it resolved that Council for the Municipality of the District of Yarmouth direct staff to amend the draft land use bylaws that relates to clarifying the right of the development officer to enter a dwelling by inserting the following text as subsection 4.2.2. Consistent with Section 267 of the Municipal Government Act, the development officer or authorized agent of the development office shall not enter any place actually being used as a dwelling without the consent of the occupier unless the entry is made in daylight hours and written notice of the time of the entry has been given to the occupier at least 24 hours in advance of the entry.
Motion on the floor, second by Councillor Patty Durkee. Councillor Allen, you still have the floor. Discussion? You didn't have to turn your mic off. Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify that the municipal council does not really have any say in this part of the bylaw, because this is a law that's come down from the province through the Municipal Government Act. And so all we're doing in this case is we're clarifying it in our own MPS, which again I feel was somewhat misinterpreted. And now we've included that information that it is the MGA that's governing the decision on this. Thank you.
Deputy Warden.
Mr. Chair, through you to staff, our CAO, and then perhaps we can have an answer to this. Is there anything that would make this motion contrary to the MGA? MGA, yes, sorry.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Deputy Warden, no, in fact, it basically just brings the language forward and clarifies the right of the development officer and how the development officer exercises that right.
Yeah, one thing I would point out, this is really no different than what was in the last MPSLUB. It's just pointed out, specifying that Section 267 of the MGA Act that was passed in 1989 originally. I did my research on that. Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. All right, council, we've gone over the 2-hour time limit for a regular council meeting. I'd entertain a motion to extend. Moved by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Nick Helton to extend the meeting. A motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Councillor Hurlbert.
Be it resolved that Council for the Municipality of the District of Yarmouth directs staff to amend the draft land use bylaw as it relates to the definition of livestock by inserting the following definitions between the definition of licensed liquor establishment and livestock operation. Livestock means cattle, sheep, swine, goats, horse, ponies, mules, varieties, farm deer, and game farm animals, and any other livestock designated by the Minister of Agriculture under authority of the Fences and Detention of Stray Livestock Act, RS 166S1.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Daniel Allen. Discussion on that motion? Councillor Hurlbert, you still have the floor.
I have a question. This doesn't include fowl, poultry?
Through you,
Can you
Mr. Chair.
speak? Yes, thank you.
This definition is consistent with the definition under the Detention of Stray Livestock Act, so Offenses in Detention of Stray Livestock Act. So we're, again, just being consistent with provincial legislation to avoid any issues. You're correct, it doesn't include poultry. However, the one use where the definition of livestock is used is in the definition of livestock operation, where we've already added in livestock and poultry, or poultry
So we've expanded it through other definitions where it matters.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Durkee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For clarification, could somebody tell me what radites are?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that includes minks and like in the rat. Wouldn't?
It's almost like an emu.
They look like an emu or an
Oh.
ostrich. They're in that family.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yep.
I've learned something today.
Okay, I got a quick question for you, Ian. One of the big problems that we have, and please people, don't take this the wrong way. I think that people should be able to sustain themselves and raise their own livestock, but when they start crossing fence lines and quote-unquote free range is where I have a problem with. We've had a problem out in a community where we've had wild turkeys running in a schoolyard with kids. Those things ain't nice. Rabbits eating up people's gardens. And the big problem is when we get complaints about stuff like that, there's really, I've been told there's nothing we can do. So would these fall under the Fence Arbitration Act? The MCO?
I'm not sure what you mean by these. So nothing in the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw would change the act that's referenced, which is the Fences and Detention of Stray Livestock Act. And that's the act that compels the municipality to convene the Fence Arbitration Committee if an animal, as defined under the act, is stray. And that particular act does not take in poultry, and our documents cannot overlay that on that act.
Poultry as in ornamental geese, chickens, roosters,
Right. Turkeys.
turkeys. See, the big problem that I see, and we're adding these things in the year, but there's no teeth, because people will let them run free, and then they start tearing up other people's property, and they use the guise of their free range. There's a difference between free range on your own property and open range across the whole community. That's the problem I have, and anyone that knows me, I come from a farming background. I grew up on a dairy farm for 25 years, and I suffered with hay fever. But I do know what a farm is, and this is the issue I have. I have no problems with the motion that's on the floor. I just, there's problems we have out there with stray swine and stuff, which it should be included in here, but my issue is when you have fowl going into other people's gardens and eating their garden that they're trying to grow to sustain themselves, they have fresh vegetables and stuff, that's where I have a big problem. But I do support the motion that's currently on the floor. Councillor Hilton.
Mr. Chair, through you to Ian, the motion is simply to add the definition, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct.
So is there a definition around poultry in the MPS and LUB at all? And sorry to put you on the spot. We had the discussion through you to Ian about adding that. Do you remember why we decided we needed to specify what livestock was?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the question came up, what is livestock? Who's going to, what's Derek going to use when someone brings forward an animal as a question mark?
The pigs. It's about the pigs.
The teacup pigs.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's clear, it's just about adding the definition, which easy to vote yes to. Is there a way to not police the number of animals you have, but make sure you keep them on your land through land use bylaws?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, that's what the Fences and Detention of Stray Livestock Act is intended to achieve, is that. As mentioned, the gap is when it comes to poultry. If the minister wanted to close that gap, the definition allows the minister through regulation to define a poultry as well. But that is the main act that municipalities use. You have your committee that's responsible for it. You have a livestock jail that you're responsible for putting them into and all that kind of stuff. But that's the main document. And the land use bylaw, deals with permits and that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's enough for this motion.
All right. Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Any other motions? Counselor Hurlbert.
I have a question about process or motions. So there are still many things that I have heard from our constituents, and some I think have, there's merit in in many of them, in us changing our language or adding some clarity to our language by, having defining statements. And so do we make those motions, or how do we know what we are asking staff, which I am assuming includes Ian, to go back and continue to work on? So we've got, we've gone through 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8 so far, which I think is great. I think, however the end result was, we've had good discussion around those. But things like, I have a few other things, and I'm not sure, do we make the motion now? Because I don't know what the exact language is. Ian and I had, some back and forth with regards to abattoirs, and there were a couple of other community concerns about some proposed zoning. So do we just make that list? Do we verbalize it tonight and then we move forward? Or do we have to make specific motions tonight?
Could that be a motion? You made any other concerns forwarded to Ian at a set time date?
So the original motion talked about staff doing work on items, but those items were never clarified.
Right.
So if we could get that list of items tonight, that would be great. With respect to something that we know is of particular interest, like abattoirs, if council could give us a sense of the direction they want to take, then we can work on developing language to present to you in your next draft around that piece. And then as far as the clarifying or qualifying statements around what is not being regulated in the NPS LUB with respect to crop-based agriculture, I mean, you can make the motion, but it's not material because it's not regulation, it's just clarifying the extent to which it applies. So, I mean, it can be in the preamble of the NPS, state it once and we're done. So I think the big item, as far as I understand, left outstanding is around the abattoir. So if we could get a sense of council's direction around that.
So I can speak to that. Our current, and we haven't changed anything in our documents. It has always been, for the last 10 years, that it has to be an abattoir. Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, has to be in a industrial zone, right? So the concern from residents, and I would completely agree now that I know what the definition is, would be that if I'm slaughtering my pig in my backyard on a Saturday afternoon, that would be against what I am allowed to do under our current and always for the last 10-year document. And I think I talked to CAO Brooks. Did you find out if we have ever if we've ever enforced this on a resident's property?
Don't know that we've ever been notified anything
Right.
was happening that shouldn't.
Right, so we've always had it, it's there, but it has been brought to our attention, so, Ian, maybe you could speak to what some possible options would be for us?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, as Councillor Hurlbert mentions, the current existing bylaw requires that abattoirs only be in the general industrial zone and or it was the rural industrial zone at the time in the existing bylaw, and only by development agreement, which is a fairly onerous process, and doesn't account for on-farm style abattoirs, for example. Done a little bit of digging. This came up kind of at the end of last week after we sent the list of potential motions to you last week, so it wasn't included in that. But I've been doing some digging and talking to people, and we have a couple of options moving forward. One would be to just allow them widely in
it could be rural zones, hamlet zones, industrial zones, or any combination, or any zones, it's up to you, really. But, you know, being specific about where we do allow them and just allow them as of right in those zones. Or if we were still, you know, and that's, I should note, that's the approach that Kings County takes, that in rural zones, abattoirs are just permitted. Or the other option is has been highlighted, is kind of differentiate between the kind of provincially regulated on-farm scale abattoir, where it's someone processing their own meat and maybe some of their neighbors' meat to help pay for the cost of having appropriate facilities, differentiating that from the meat processing facility, the federally inspected, you know, full-on Larson Meats industrial facility, and taking a tiered approach to being laxer about the smaller facility and continuing the current approach to the larger ones.
Okay, so is it fair to ask for some language from, and I say staff and you, to come up with some language to bring back to us that would, even though we have never enforced what is there, I think that, you know, doing our due diligence to try to come up with some language. Again, we're probably not always going to get it right, but it's better, I feel like it's better than what we have, to, you know, allay people's fears that we are, now that they've brought it to our attention, we're going to go out and start policing how and where people, you know, slaughter their animals. So, yeah, if you could come back, you and staff could work on some language that might help us with that, that would be great.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Madam
Do-
CEO?
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, do I need a motion for that?
Through you to
Sorry.
Councillor Hurlbert, yeah, if we could have a motion and an indication of which approach
Okay.
is more favorable.
I will make a motion to direct staff, including the consultant, to work on some language regarding abattoirs that would make, I hear Jenny clicking away as I'm I'm saying the words, to allow for residential, allow anyone to slaughter animals on a small scale, but I don't know what small scale is. Don't put that in there.
We'll do that work.
Okay, okay.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Allen. Discussion? Councillor Hilton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that's appropriate. I sat in on a conversation on Friday with a number of our local farmers, and this was one of the topics we discussed. And I think you're spot on. I don't think, and I learned a lot, because the idea of an industrial-sized slaughterhouse in Yarmouth County isn't really relative, because we don't have the number of animals or the land to make that happen. But at the same time, you want to protect against that happening. I see that. So making an accommodation for the appropriate size where a farmer can help himself and his neighbors, and maybe put a little bit more money in their pockets is appropriate. So I think, Ian, you're hearing maybe where a couple councillors are coming from and what that language might look like. So I'm not sure if it goes by the floor size of the abattoir or what, but, and to enforce that, I know that, I'm not sure, I won't say we dropped the ball, but there was probably a conversation to have with agriculture about the draft documents that we're now having, which is the best part. In the letter that's in our correspondence from Evan Kleiner, reinforces the fact that they'd like to get back to us on a couple things. So this gives them the month to do that. So hopefully you can take that all into account when you bring back the recommendation. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Any more on this subject? I do have one thing, and I don't know if I'm going to be making a motion in that regards, because I'm not sure. It's regards to travel trailers, it being used as permanent residence. If I'm not mistaken, currently that you can have 2 trailers on a lot up to 60 days. And all they really would need to do is, if they had it there as their on a piece of property that they have for their own enjoyment. That we currently allow that. But something that I know is going on across the communities, all across the municipality district of Yarmouth and also other municipalities, they're popping up as permanent residents. And when I talk about travel trailers, I'm the ones that you can license for the road and pull them down the road and move them. The biggest issue that I see is going up, and unfortunately, we're in a time there where housing has become a humongous issue, and people have problems finding sustainable housing or affordable housing. But the problem is these travel trailers are, number one, we can't tax them. Number two, we don't know where they're getting fresh water. Number three, we have no idea where they're dumping their sewage, or even if they are, calling a pumping company to come in. I'm not after the weekend camper. What I'm looking for is something in regards to permanent residents, more than 60 days. And there's instances that I can think of, but in regards to freedom of protection, or protection of privacy and stuff like that, I can't say it in a public meeting, but I do know what's going on. I also know that there's squatting going on across on Crown Land with campers in the middle of nowhere that haven't moved. I don't know how we could address that, but I think that's something that needs to be addressed because it seems to be becoming a bigger problem as time goes on, and no fault of their own. Look, when it comes to the housing strategies and stuff like that, we're hearing a whole bunch of different things about grades that different governments are getting all across the province and across Canada and even the federal government. But we have a big problem because they don't, number one, have the facilities, and number two, when they want services from the municipality district of Yarmouth, like when it comes to garbage and stuff like that, there's no structure to attach it to in taxation. So I don't know how we can even work at that, or even if there's ways that we could add that in there. And once again, I'm not after the weekend camper where the family wants to go play guitar on their own property. I'm not after that. What I'm after is long-term residents, and it's becoming more of an issue. Deputy Warden?
Mr. Chair, I think the document does include something that regulates that, and the fact that it prohibits it. And it's there. You can only stay for 60 days, and you have to tow it off. Now, I guess the practicality of, we all know the practicality of enforcing that is a little suspect. But having said that, you know, if we get a real problematic situation, we could probably go after it harder. I mean, again, it all depends on how much you want to, as a council, go after this. I think we've said that you can't do it, and when instances, you know, pop up, we'll have to deal with them on an individual case-by-case basis. So, you know, if folks know of somebody who's breaking our bylaw, they're, you know, more than welcome to call staff, and staff can deal with it and come to council if they need some, you know, additional guidance. We have that all the time with unsightly premises and that type of thing. Nothing's 100% foolproof, and you know, I think we've done our due diligence. I just don't know what more we could do around it. So, to your point, so.
And I don't know what more we could do either, but I do know it's becoming a problem. I just threw it out there. If there's no motion made, then there's none made. We can try to do it through our current municipal planning strategies and land use bylaws, or the amended ones, should they pass, on whatever form they take. But just wondering if that was the last subject that I had that I can think of. Since we've got this document open, we're over into extended hours. Councillor Hurlbert.
I have other things on my list.
Go for it.
Do we need to go somewhere with yours? I wasn't cutting you off, I'm just telling you that, yeah, I'm not quite done.
Well, as the deputy warden stated, that we do have current things in that regard, so If something needs to be changed, I know this document can be opened up, and if I see it becoming a bigger problem down the road in a few months, then I'll do it myself. Go ahead, Councillor
Okay,
Herbert.
thank you. Through you to Ian. Dark skies, another topic that if I hadn't gone through my page, I probably would have forgot. Can you give us a summary on what we have proposed? And have we, and I guess from there, we can have the discussion about, do we think that includes everything it needs to include? Sorry for blindsiding you on this one.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Herbert. So that was one that came up at PAC, and we made some tweaks to it. And the way the documents landed in the end was, first of all, on the municipal plan, recognizing the value of dark skies. This is part of the Dark Sky Preserve, and how important that is. Then in the criteria that council uses to evaluate any discretionary applications, so that's your development agreements or your land use bylaw amendments like rezonings, impact on dark skies is something that for you to look at as a council whenever one of those applications comes to you. And so if it's an application that has it's in that list of criteria that we've included. So if there's an application that's going to threaten the dark skies designation of the municipality, for example, you could use that as grounds to push back on the application and require them to have controls in the development agreement, or you could use it as the basis for turning down an agreement if it was that serious. So that's on the discretionary planning approval side. Then in the land use bylaw for things that come as of right to Derek, there is a requirement for lighting plans for new main buildings if it's 5 or more dwelling units, so multi-unit dwellings, new commercial main buildings, and new industrial main buildings. So that as part of their application for those, they would have to provide a lighting plan that would go to the development officer. We drew that line on, where's the burden, where's the potential risk. So like, a single unit dwelling, building a house, that doesn't have that requirement in the drafts, but as you get into those larger developments, that lighting plan would be required.
Okay, are you aware of any municipalities that actually have them on a single dwelling? I've heard some feedback from our constituents that, people are building either really tiny homes or really big homes. And the really big homes are casting a lot of light into, and I saw, and I think I knew the answer to your question, to my question before I asked it, about 5 dwelling units, but that doesn't, and I know we've had the discussion at the last council meeting, I think, about, how do we police those single, but those big houses are casting, we have them very close by that I hear complaints about all the time. Is there a way, do we have any mechanism on those large houses that have lighting that is polluting our dark skies?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. You could base it on floor area or something like that, on certain dwellings over a certain floor area. I wouldn't sit here today and feel comfortable saying that they are more of a problem, factually, I don't have the facts in front of me to say that that's more of a problem than me building a tiny house with crazy lights up in the air. But if you really wanted to, you could go that route, but it is an additional something that has, that a developer or property owner has to prepare to go through the steps of getting a permit and probably involve a professional, and there's a cost to that.
No, I understand that. So we have, through this we have tightened up
Quite a bit.
quite a bit.
Compared
Do we
to
see any gaps?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
That's quite a question.
No, I think it's a fair question. Like we've talked about it, we've had feedback from the public on this. I just want to make sure that we...
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess the gap is on those smaller the smaller residential developments don't have that same requirement. Whether that's a reasonable gap in terms of the, big steps forward and testing this out and how it works at the counter and all that kind of thing, it might be worth seeing how it goes with.
Okay. Well, I'm okay to leave it for now. I just wanted to make sure that we felt like we had it covered better than we did. Thank you.
Any more? This subject? Counselor Hilton.
On the dark sky subject or any subject?
Any subject, because once we leave this,
Well, again, separate meeting. Small wind turbines, it says, why, I had a question, why 200 meters from a dwelling and not 200 meters from a property line? So does that mean I can put it, 6 feet from my property line and then my neighbor builds a house and it's right next to his house?
Let me look this up.
Sorry. Now I'm just picking and choosing.
Give me a second here. Do you have a section reference for that?
Yeah, except I can't tell you what, if it's the MPS or LUB 7.15.1.
I found it. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it's from 200 meters from existing dwellings.
So how close to a property line would that be?
Sorry, I'm getting feedback here. That isn't regulated currently. So, yeah, if you built your house after the fact, it may end up closer than that 200 meters.
Is that an issue? Should that be regulated? And what would that look like?
There is a, if you go to A,
Mr. Chair, the development officer has a
Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
useful.
he's got it.
No, go ahead, Derek.
So under the same section, there is a minimum setback from lot lines of 1.25 times the total height of the wind turbine, measured from either grade or the base of the supporting structure, whichever is greater.
Thank you.
any more questions or comments on this section? I will say this, I've heard a couple times that maybe we should have held a separate meeting. I have to say that sort of angers me. That really angers me, and I'll explain anyone after the meeting why. Because, I'll say this at the start, and I'm not disparaging the PAC committee or anything like that, but there is members of council that are on PAC. You sent it up here. You decided you were going to send it so that we have a review. Then you brought it back here and you're still making changes. As far as I'm concerned, you should have read it then. Leave it at that. If there's no more on this subject, item 8.2, bylaw, 8.2.1, second reading of civic addressing bylaw C-610-23. Deputy Warden.
I'll move that we approve civic addressing bylaw C-610-23. Is circulated.
Motion on the floor, to have a seconder? Second by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Discussion on that motion? Madam CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify that, it's approval of second reading.
It is.
Thank you.
Also, a point of clarification, this, once the second reading, is it have to be notified, and is there a advertisement process in that?
We just have to advertise that it's been approved, and we submit it to the province, but there's no approval.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion, Deputy Warden?
No, sorry.
Hearing none, motion on the floor to approve second reading of civic addressing bylaw C-610-23. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.2.2, second reading of transient vendor bylaw T-088-23. Deputy Warden?
I'll move the municipality district of Yarmouth approve second reading of the transient vendor bylaw T-088-23. 088-23.
Motion on the floor, second by Councillor Patty Durkee. Discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.3, 43155715, reduction of tax request. Deputy Warden?
Sorry, I kept my mic on, but I'll move that we approve, that the municipality district of Yarmouth approve the tax reduction is circulated in the amount of, $1,704.06.
Motion on the floor, do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Nick Hilton. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item in 8.4, absence of the warden, which is me. This is just to notify everyone around the table and the public that's here in the gallery and public online. I will be away from October the 4th until October the 16th. I will be away out of country, and I will have limited access to emails. I probably won't have access to phones, but if there's any requests, please forward them to staff or the deputy warden or any council member of your choice. Just for your information. Item 8.5, recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. 8.5.1, vulnerable persons in emergencies, crisis situations. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Actually, I'm sorry, I tried to get your attention before. If you don't mind, I'd like to be excused from the rest of the council meeting, as I have to go to work. And I have a long journey ahead of me to get there, so I think
It's not permission to be excused, just say I need to.
Okay, well, I'd like to be excused,
excused.
please, from council. I appreciate the work we've done tonight, and look forward to seeing what comes out of this. And, yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Jenny, please note in the meeting minutes that Councillor Daniel Allen left at 8:42. To everyone that's watching, that does matter, because that means that the vote would change. A vote of 3-3, motion would be defeated. That's the reason why it needs to be noted. All right, back to the agenda. 8.5.1, vulnerable persons in emergencies, crisis situations. Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the motion that the municipality of the District of Yarmouth direct staff to contact Yarmouth County Regional Emergency Management Organization and inquire if a vulnerable persons list will be considered and created.
Okay, motion on the floor. I have a seconder. Seconded by Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham. Discussion? Question being called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.2, volunteer emergency service provider fuel tax exemption. Deputy Warden.
I'll move that the municipality district of Yarmouth send a letter to the municipality of Barrington and the organizations copied on their letter, and indicating that the municipality district of Yarmouth supports the municipality district of Barrington regarding volunteer emergency service providers being exempt from the fuel tax.
Okay, motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.3, a letter from Betty Cox. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make the motion that the municipality of the District of Yarmouth, we did that already? No, we didn't. Oh, we didn't do that one, no. That we submit Mrs. Cox's presentation as a letter to be received from her and filed with the public hearing documents for consideration during the adoption of the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw.
Motion on the floor, seconder, second by Councillor Patty Durkee. Discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.4, applications for funding for housing projects. Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make a motion that the municipality and district of Yarmouth look for funding to support the development of the housing, or look for funding to support the development of a housing plan for our municipality. And I'm assuming we're directing staff to do so.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Durkee. Discussion? Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note that there was an announcement today or yesterday of a large sum of money that's being to open 222 residents in other areas like Bridgewater, Truro, CBRM, HRM, at Kentville. And so I look forward to working on this, and hopefully that we can get some funding our way.
Absolutely. Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Before I move on, I'd like to entertain someone make a motion that we recess for 5 minutes for a bio break.
Sure.
Moved by Councillor Nick Hilton, seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. All in favor signify by
Aye.
saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Oh, sorry.
It's a marathon.
Negative.
All right, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Thank you, everyone. We left off at item 8.5.5, rural cell phone coverage, recommendation from the committee of the whole. What is the pleasure of council? Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham.
Yeah, I'll move that Municipal District of Yarmouth send a letter to Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities requesting, once committees are in place, that the rural cell coverage issue be addressed.
Okay, a motion on the floor, seconded by Councillor Patty Durkee. Any discussion on that? I will say this much. We should have been dealing with that when we were dealing with rural internet, both at the same time, but unfortunately, the funding wasn't there. But this is another step that we need to take and keep right on pushing. Councillor Cushing?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I gotta say, cell phone service is getting worse. You know, at one time, I had no trouble over where I lived in Chicago Point. Now, it's terrible. And it must be, driving down on the 103, you know, you lose it. So it's terrible. So I hope something can be done about it.
Absolutely. Any more discussion, Madam CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have new information for council to share tonight on this file. Last week, municipal administrators met in the region of Southwest Nova Scotia, and we talked about this issue. Following that, I had a meeting with the Chief Executive Officer of our Regional Enterprise Network today, who met recently with Build Nova Scotia. And one of the challenges with finding dollars to address the cell phone issue was around having an agency be mandated to look at that by government. And I can let you know that Build Nova Scotia has officially received instructions from the province of Nova Scotia to look at the cell phone issue. And so I'm not sure what that means for the fall sitting in the legislature in terms of funding or legislation around that. But what I'd ask leave of council to do is to craft the letter in such a way that we acknowledge there's movement with respect to the mandate, but asking NSFM to consider taking it on for one of their committees if it doesn't appear that a solution is being provided.
Deputy Warden?
So since I was a mover for the motion, that seems like a reasonable way forward. So yeah, it is part of the understanding of the motion, that's fine.
Okay, any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. My apologies, everyone, if you see me rolling something in my mouth. I have a sore throat. It's picking up, and I'm just trying to make sure that I don't start breaking up. Okay, moving on to item 8.5.6.
You need to vote, Mr. Chair.
Oh, that's right, there was two motions. Councillor Hurlbert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make the motion that the Municipality of District of Yarmouth direct staff to set up a meeting with the Honorable Chris Jean-Tremont MP, specific to but not limited to rural cell phone coverage.
Motion on the floor, do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patty Durkee. Motion on the floor, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.6, request for decision 2023 J-Class road nomination. Deputy Warden, you have the floor.
I'll move that the municipality of the District of Yarmouth accept the CAO's recommendation and submit the following project in priority order to the Nova Scotia Public Works, on the spreadsheet provided by Nova Scotia Public Works, and to be funded through the 24-25 capital investment plan. 1 Park Drive, and that's 0.2 kilometer Brooklyn Road, westerly to cul-de-sac, repave. 2 Hillside Drive, 0.2 kilometers from Trunk 1 Dayton, half paved, half gravel. It's an upgrade to all paved. 3 Hector Street, 0.2 kilometers from Trunk 1 in Port Maitland, repave. 4 Churchill Street, 0.2 kilometers from Trunk 1 in Dayton, half paved, half gravel.
Your motion on the floor, to have a seconder? seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.7, EHS Life Flight Airplane. What is council's pleasure? Deputy Warden?
I'll move that the municipality of District of Yarmouth send a letter to the province and applicable departments thanking them for enhancing the EHS Life Flight service at the Yarmouth International Airport. So it's very, very welcome news.
Motion on the floor, seconder, second by Councillor Patty Durkee. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.8, repeal of audiovisual recording policy A-210-13. Recommendation from Committee of the Whole is in your package. Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, and I'll move that the municipality and district of Yarmouth repeal the audiovisual recording policy A-210-13.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.9, November and December Committee of the Whole meeting dates. You all have that in your package. What is the pleasure of council? Councillor Hurlbert.
Make a motion that the municipality of District of Yarmouth hold their November Committee of the Whole, that their November Committee of the Whole date be changed from Thursday, November the 9th, 2023 to November 16th at 2:30, and the regular council meeting be changed from November 22nd to November 29th at 6 p.m.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Patty Durkee. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. There's a second motion in there. Councillor Durkee.
I'll make a motion that the municipality of the District of Yarmouth that recommend, no, we don't recommend, we're at regular council, that the December Committee of the Whole and regular council meetings be combined and held on Wednesday, December 14th, 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.5.10, council training, public engagement. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make the motion that the municipality of District of Yarmouth direct staff to explore companies that would be able to provide training and insight on public engagement and report back to council.
Okay, motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushion. Discussion? I like this motion. It's one of my favorite ones of the night because we're always looking for ways to engage the public more. And obviously tonight was, I don't think that we done our best job, so anything that we can do to improve, absolutely. Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. 8.5.11, parkland dedication. You have in there in front of you 3 files. Deputy Warden?
Yes, this applies to file 9948. Move that the municipality of District of Yarmouth accept the amount of $900 equivalent to the 5% of the market value of lot 2023 for PID 90174269, file 9948.
Okay, motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Another motion, Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I'll move that the municipality of Yarmouth accept the amount of $1,007.10 equivalent to the 5% of the market value of lot KC-5 for for PID 901-64427, file 9949.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushion. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. One more there. You're on a roll.
I'll move the municipalities of Yarmouth accept the amount of $1,315, equivalent to the 5% of the market value of Lot WS-1 for PID 9014840, file 9950.
Okay, a motion on the floor. I have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, item 8.6, a recommendation from the Accessory Advisory Committee. There's motions that they made in regards to the 4 priorities of the admin building, and there's also 3 priorities that were put there for the Hebron Rotary Center. So I guess, if I'm not mistaken, Madam CEO, we need council, a motion from council that we've received the report, correct?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
That's quite all right.
It's cold season. So I think, I wasn't at the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting when this motion was made, but what I understood from staff was that it could be that when council receives the pricing on doing the work, that they might have to make choices based on money. And that if decisions have to be made, that the Accessibility Advisory Committee feels like the work should be prioritized in this way. What I would say is the scope of work that's included in the accessibility audits are required by legislation. So we're probably going to have to find the money to do it all. But I do understand where the advisory committee is coming from.
Okay, Councillor Hurlbert? No, Deputy Warden.
No, I'll defer to council.
Councillor Hurlbert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee and Councillor Cushing being on that as well, yes, that's Madam CAO's synopsis of that is correct. We understand that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in both locations, and I think I am safe to say for the Accessibility Advisory Committee, we know that these things may not be the priority depending on how timelines, and we know that everything has to be done eventually, but keeping in mind that if there are some areas, these were the ones that, like any advisory committee, we're just saying, here's what we think would be the best things, but we know that there are a lot of things. And so I know that in the CAO's report, there was some discussion on, can that tie into this as well?
Sure. So the municipality had issued a request for proposals to hire the prime design consultant to effect the work that's required to be done. And we did not receive any bids on that. So I am in a position now where I'll be looking to invite proposals. So I'll be contacting specific firms who advertise that they do this type of work in terms of accessibility upgrades, and asking them if they would be willing to bid on the project. So we haven't even started designing the work yet.
Right, okay. So anyway, just, to Madam CAO's point, these are just some things that if we had to look at narrowing it down, or what would our first couple of things be, these were some of the things that they'd like us to consider. But again, as council, we can make the decision. So really, to the CAO's point, we haven't got far enough down that road to know that these would even be. So I would make a motion that we received the report from the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Yep, motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushion. Any more discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 8.7, revocation of appointment of development officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A number of months ago, the municipality appointed Fuki Shoot I gotta look up her last name, from C&D Community, Asia? Speak up, Jenny. Appointed her as a development officer under the contract for temporary services, and council have appointed Derek Robertson already as a development officer, and we have hired Derek Robertson as a permanent full-time employee. So because the appointment as a development officer comes with certain legislative rights and privileges, and because we no longer are under contract with C&D Community Design, I need council to revoke her appointment as development officer.
Moved by Councillor Nick Hilton. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lauren Cushion. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 9.1 for action. Deputy Warden?
Right, this correspondence comes from Amanda Brewer, and Amanda chairs the Active Transportation Committee at Health Promoting School, team at Maple Grove, and it's a request to do some crosswalks, and they're very complimentary of the work council's done on putting sidewalks, in the area that sort of serves, or closely serves Maple Grove, so, that's really good work that we've done. Having said that, the issues of crosswalks, while I agree with them in principle, it's fairly complicated because it's governed by the province, and they're asking in the letter saying, you should suggest these to the province as a council. So what I'd do is I'd make a motion to direct staff to get in touch with the province and vet the letter, the request, and come back to council with the recommendation.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. Discussion? I do have one thing in regards, I guess this is a question to CAO. So, requests for sidewalks on provincial roads wouldn't, and it, from my understanding, is it the MGA that the school board is basically their, or the Tri-County Regional School Board Authority would be their own point of contact rather than us?
So in the correspondence, a copy of the March crosswalk installation policy for the Department of Public Works was included, and there are a couple of different streams under which crosswalks can be installed. And so I thank the Deputy Warden for the motion on the floor, because to me the correspondence is unclear. Is the request for the sidewalks coming from the Health Promoting Schools Committee? Is it coming from the province through them? And so, yeah, I would like to have the opportunity to have a couple of conversations and come back to council.
So there was a seconder on the motion. Councillor Hurlbert?
Just want clarity. Some of the conversation was about sidewalks, and we just want to make sure we know that we're talking about crosswalks, not sidewalks, crosswalks, right? I think it was just a misspeak, but just so we
Yes,
know,
it was.
we're not talking
It's been a
about,
long night.
crosswalks. And I would agree, there's some things that talk about marked school crosswalk, reasonable approach speed. There's lots of stuff that I didn't understand. I did see the money attached to it. That was, a big thing. So, yeah, I appreciate the work that will be done.
So myself personally, I'd rather see that we defer a decision on this until staff could do some more work. Or
I
not.
think that's the motion, Mr. Chair, for staff to vet the request and come back to council with a recommendation.
Okay, for some reason, I didn't hear all the motion. So I'm going to ask the recording secretary if she wouldn't mind that she would repeat the motion as she heard it.
The motion is to direct staff to get in contact with the province and vet the letter request and come back to council with a recommendation.
Okay, now I'm clear. Any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 9.1.2, correspondence, Deputy Warden?
I'd like to also make a motion that Municipal District of Yarmouth write a letter to Maple Grove thanking them for the correspondence and suggestions and indicating what action we're taking on the file in the interim.
Okay, a motion on the floor is seconded by Councillor Sherry Hurlbert. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 9.1.2, correspondence read Plan Modi. You'll have that in your package. Councillor Hurlbert? Oh, sorry. Councillor Cushing?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. As outlined in Evan Kleiner's letter to us, it certainly proves to me that the sensitive environment areas were misconstrued to include those marshlands that have been dedicated to farmers for generations. So I may not be able to say the proper words, but again, there's a number of concerned citizens who we probably have not contacted or have not contacted us, saying that there's something wrong in this land use planning and planning strategy that we're reviewing. And I think yes, it did come to our PAC meeting way back in June, and we approved to move it to council, but unfortunately, the document was so large, and I believe personally myself, I could not digest the whole thing to make a proper decision. And I think our PAC committee does good work, despite some accusations against them tonight. And I believe it's important that we acknowledge that the PAC are doing a fairly good job. So, okay, but this is certainly an example of how the interpretation of our new bylaws are taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Hilton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I need to clarify for the public that although we removed the extra sensitive environment areas, the floodplains and dikelands that they still farm are still sensitive environment areas under the new policy. The issue was never with the term sensitive environment area, it was with the interpretation of the document. So floodplains, dikelands that they graze and hay are still in this document under sensitive environment areas.
What is council's wishes? Councillor Hurlbert.
I didn't make the motion to, oh, okay. I'll make the motion that the municipality of District of Yarmouth include this letter in the same wording we used for the Betty Cox letter. And yes, that
Public
one.
documents. Moved by
Sorry.
Councillor Sher Hurlbert, second by Councillor Patty Durkee. Discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 9.2, for your information, there's feedback on the Memorandum of Understanding for Service Exchange from the Municipality District of Chester. That's for your information. But I will say this much. I think this is something that the Municipality District of Yarmouth should talk about the understanding of the service exchange, because it's in regards to local roads, and the current proposal provides 3 options for local roads in rural areas. I think our council really needs a discussion on this in an upcoming committee of the whole. The service exchange is quite it could affect the way the Municipality District of Yarmouth and all municipalities across the province operate. And it's also talking about provincial roads. Councillor Hurlbert?
I'll make the motion that we add this to, I'm not sure if we have room on the October Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the whole is probably okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
committee
the
of whole,
October
okay.
Committee of the Whole, yes, for discussion. And maybe as part of our package, we could include everything that we need to, in order, like, more than just this one letter. Right, perfect, thank you.
Okay, a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Nick Hilton. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 10, 10.1, CEO's report. You all have that in your package. Councillor Hurlbert.
There's lots here, lots of good work. Thank you to our CAO and our staff and us as council for all the work that we've been doing. I noticed on page 1, under 3, council's legislative agenda, we talked about ballots, and it says here, alternative voting bylaw. It has been confirmed that the municipality can offer one poll with paper ballots. An amendment to section 3 of the bylaw is required. So are you planning to bring that to us at a future meeting, or do we need to?
I'll bring it to the October Committee of the Whole meeting.
Okay.
Because there'll be draft language, and I just, prior to going to council, Committee of the Whole just needs to vet it to make sure the language achieves what you're trying to achieve.
Sure, thank you, and I appreciate all of the updates. I won't go through them, considering the time. All of the updates on our strategic plan and the status of some of those things. So for all of us and the public, they can read through those and see where we are right now. Thanks. And I'll make a motion to accept the CA's report as presented.
Motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Hilton. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 10.2, you have the warden's report in there. I'm going to be very honest. I did this late last night, and this was in between phone calls. So when my first part about the amount of phone calls I've been getting lately, which averaged 1 or 2 a day, turned into 7. Well, yesterday, it turned into, I don't know how many. My phone was burning like you wouldn't believe. So my apologies if I left some stuff out of there. There was Pride Week that recently went on. Also, we had the volunteer event that happened in Halifax, and I'd like to thank Councillor Nick Hilton for attending that on my behalf. Unfortunately, a lot of things come up this week. The Black Battalion Monument unveiling. It's good to see a good turnout there from our council there. And it always strikes me when I've seen Chuck Smith and the other members wearing the period uniforms of the First World War. But that was quite a moving experience, and just a reminder never to let anything like that happen again. Well, that's my report. Item 10.3, legal entities. Anyone have any to add to the ones on there? Councillor Hurlbert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one sec. I'm just trying to, I'm on the board of the Regional Solid Waste, and just a couple of things. At our last meeting, the Solid Waste Park did an audit on the blue bags and Scotia Recycling. So we had a breakdown, and I think it will be included in the October council meeting. All of that, we'll try to include all of that. So what happens at the Solid Waste Park, they took a truckload of blue bags, and they went through them, and our manager at the waste park sorted through them and found all of the things that shouldn't have been in there, and he categorized them by what is good and what percentage. It was amazing. So on our next council meeting, we'll make sure that that's included. So that was a great work. So that shows us as a solid waste, and also Waste Check where they need to increase education around. So there were some things that were obvious. So we know all paper, disposable cups from all of those fast food restaurants all go in the garbage, every single one of them. It used to be that a certain supplier, a certain vendor, you could put them in the recycling, but that is no longer. So all recycling cups go in the garbage, and the lids go in the blue bag. And we need to make sure, yes, it's been...
I didn't know that.
Yes, all of them. So there was one company that they could go in the recycling, and now they can't. It's all garbage, because the current owner changed their cups on us, on the public. So there's lots of things that we learned from the audit. It was very eye-opening, but it also helps Waste Check know where they need to do some more education. And we also recommended that maybe they would do some videos, so they would actually take a load of those blue bags, and so instead of us just looking at a chart and a graph, there would be a video taken of someone sorting through that garbage to show people what should be there and what shouldn't be there. We're doing a lot right. There are just some glaring things that we could be improving upon. And we also had a debrief on the Barrington Lake wildfire when it comes to solid waste. Our solid waste department, it feels like I'm not yelling anymore when that goes off. So we had a debrief on that, and we found some things that we know we did right, but also some things that other municipalities could do better. So the way we do things and the way Barrington sorts and disposes of their solid waste, garbage, recycling, all of those things are different. And I do know that through EPR, there was some discussion on there being a provincial, so one municipality can't have just one blue bag, they would have to have, like, it's all going to be streamlined, hopefully. But we did learn a lot of things, and we've asked staff to work with the CAOs to come up with a disaster plan for, emergency plan for us in case something were to happen at our solid waste facility. We need to know what we need to do and who needs to do it and how we're going to get it done. So we learned a lot from the Barrington wildfire. We learned what they were doing well, and we were glad to be able to help them out in that case. But yeah, just a couple of things from that. So good work.
Thank you. I'd be real interested to see that report in regards to the recyclables and stuff. Any more reports in regards to legal entities, verbal? Okay, none. Deputy Warden?
Yeah, just a quick update for the Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission. And we've had several meetings lately, but they really almost all revolved around the transition to sort of mostly operational control to the Nova Scotia Health Authority. So we'll own the buildings, Harbour South and in the Pubnico Clinic, and we're undertaking leasehold improvements at the two sites to better serve our tenants. One of which is NSHA. So in any event, the big change will be a collaborative practice among the physicians and other employees there, healthcare providers. And so I think it's a real move forward. And we're getting out of the management of the properties largely, but we will still retain them and do the leasehold improvements and those types of things. So good news. We're always working on the port and port governance, and of course we own a number of the wharves downtown jointly among the three councils, and I guess those are the large pieces of work that we're engaged with right now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Is that it for legal entities? Item 10.4, advisory committees. Councillor Durkee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have actually some great news. First of all, Nancy Ellis, our new community navigator, has taken on that role, and she's got her feet wet very quickly and has already done 4 site visits for doctors. And I don't know if some of you have seen recently, but we have a Dr. Wang, who's a new family practitioner that's coming, and we have a new obs-gynae doctor that's here, and we're really making progress. And the other piece of good news is that because they've changed the regulations, we are apparently, the recruiters from the province are getting inundated now with calls and emails and letters about people who are willing to move to Nova Scotia to start their practices. So the changes in the regulations are making a huge difference, and it's really nice to see things moving forward. It's very, very positive. They were literally said, we're inundated. We can't keep up with all the phone calls and messages from people wanting to come here. So, yay, good news.
Absolutely, that's great news. Thank you very much for all the work that committee does. on behalf of all the residents of the municipality, anything that we can do to help improve healthcare is welcome. Is there any more reports under advisory? Seeing none. Ad hoc, fence arbitration?
It was closed, but no.
It was closed, but no. All right, there's no in-camera meeting items, so I'm going to move that we adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.